On a quiet May night in 1981, an 11-year-old boy awoke to find a tall, masked intruder tying him up. Minutes later, he witnessed a scene no child should ever have to face. His mother, Christine, shot to death, lying in a pool of blood and tied to her bed. The investigation quickly pointed to Lori Bambi Bembenek, a 22-year-old former police officer, as the culprit. But as the case unfolds, questions begin to arise. Was Lori really a cold-blooded killer? Or was she simply a scapegoat in a corrupt and sexist system? Lori Bembenek was born on August 15, 1958, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, growing up in a picturesque neighborhood she adored. Lori often draws inspiration from the beauty of her homeland to nurture her creativity. After finishing high school, she pursued her artistic interests by studying design and fashion at Bryant and Stratton College. Though the school was far from her family's home, her enthusiasm pushed her to relocate temporarily to Virginia. 2 years later, having earned her associate's degree, Lori returned to Milwaukee, eager to begin her career. During this time, Lori blossomed into a striking young woman. She always pays attention to her appearance, but is also very considerate of the people around her. Friends described her as kind, sensitive, and warm-hearted. For a while, she modeled for magazines and K&Rs, but her ambitions soon shifted. Lori's father, a former police officer, had left the force in frustration over widespread corruption. He had vowed never to return unless conditions improved. And in the meantime, he worked as a carpenter. Inspired by his principles and determined to show that integrity could still prevail, Lori decided to pursue a career in law enforcement herself. The police force, however, was an overwhelmingly male environment, and her father warned her of the difficulties ahead. At just 20 years old, Lori faced immense challenges. Women were rare in the department, and many male officers openly resented their presence. Even at the police academy, Lori encountered resistance. Fortunately, she wasn't alone. She befriended Judy Zess, another young woman recruit. They quickly bonded, supporting each other through the trials of training. Lori proved herself strong and athletic, often meeting or surpassing the physical standards required of men. Graduation posed no problem for her. In 1980, Lori joined the Milwaukee Police Department, but the hostility only deepened. Her male colleagues viewed her as a threat to their culture and resisted her presence at every turn. Rather than support, she received harassment and thinly veiled threats. Even minor mistakes were ridiculed, creating a toxic workplace environment. Judy also graduated and joined the force, strengthening their friendship as they faced similar struggles. They spent free time together, watching movies or attending parties, finding comfort in each other's understanding of the job's pressures. Lori met adversity with determination, while Judy sometimes turned to marijuana to cope. One day, Judy was caught smoking in Lori's presence. Though Lori did not participate, Judy was immediately arrested and dismissed from the force. Lori, too, came under suspicion, initially accused of being an accomplice. Toxicology tests cleared Lori of banned substance use, but investigators still searched for a way to implicate her. Eventually, Lori was accused of complicity simply for failing to report Judy's violation. From then on, the pressure intensified. Many in the department wanted Lori gone, scrutinizing her every move for grounds to fire her. By August 1980, she was dismissed from the force and effectively blacklisted, making it nearly impossible to find similar work. The official reason, complicity in a crime, felt to Lori like nothing more than a pretext. She believed her dismissal was rooted in prejudice and resentment, a deliberate attempt to push her out. Feeling betrayed, she saw herself as yet another casualty of the corruption and injustice her father had warned her about. That summer, The Milwaukee precinct regularly held parties where officers gathered outdoors or in public spaces to drink, often pushing well past the limits of decency. At one large picnic in the city park in 1980, alcohol flowed freely. As the revelry escalated, several officers stripped off their clothes, danced naked on tables, and indiscriminated intimacy with women. The event took place in public view, was witnessed by residents, and provocative photographs were taken. When Lori learned of the incident, she was outraged. She believed that such blatant misconduct warranted far harsher punishment than her friend Judy's private marijuana use. Her anger was understandable. She had lost her job for something beyond her control, while those engaging in public indecency faced no consequences. Determined to seek justice, Lori obtained copies of the photographs and confirmed that none of the officers involved had been disciplined, furious at the double standard within the department. She submitted the photos to the police committee and filed a lawsuit, alleging discrimination. More than justice, Lori hoped these efforts might restore her position on the force, a job she had fought hard to earn. But her case stalled, and ultimately, no one was punished. At the time, Lori and Judy were struggling financially. Both unemployed, they shared a small apartment, barely able to cover rent. They blamed the Milwaukee Police Department for their situation, their savings rapidly vanishing. Desperate for income, Lori accepted an offer to work at the Playboy Club, a private venue catering to wealthy men about an hour outside Milwaukee. Though the job meant wearing revealing outfits and serving food and drinks, she saw it as a temporary solution to pay off debts. Judy, however, was not hired. Lori quickly discovered the financial rewards. Generous tips eased her money troubles, yet she disliked the atmosphere from the start. The lewd remarks, unwanted advances, and harassment from patrons wore her down. Matters turned darker when she found a dead rat placed on the hood of her car after a shift. Rats were unheard of at the upscale club, and Lori interpreted this as a threat, an intimidation tactic linked to her complaints against the police. Rather than frightening her into silence, the incident only strengthened her resolve to fight for women's rights, particularly within law enforcement. After a month at the club, Lori could no longer tolerate the environment and resigned. She had saved enough to settle her debts and extend her lease. Seeking stability, she found work as a trainer at a fitness club. Around this time, Lori met Alfred O. Fred Schultz, a police officer 10 years her senior who worked at the same station where she and Judy had once served. Fred had even attended the infamous naked party, though Lori was unaware of this when they met. In turn, I had no knowledge of her discrimination complaint and bore her no resentment. Then, Lori and Fred fell in love. She overlooked his flaws, including a reputation as a ladies' man, choosing instead to embrace the romance. Fred had recently divorced his first wife, Christine Schultz, who left him after uncovering his repeated infidelities. He had 2 young sons from that marriage. Charming and persuasive, Fred soon proposed to Lori, and she accepted. In January 1981, just 3 months after his divorce, they married in Illinois. However, Wisconsin law required a 6-month waiting period after divorce before remarriage, so their first marriage was annulled. They later remarried legally, after which Fred moved into the small apartment Lori shared with Judy and her boyfriend. Meanwhile, Christine, Fred's ex-wife, was left raising their 2 sons in the family home. Fred now faced mounting financial and housing difficulties. He often complained to Lori and Judy about the alimony and child support payments he was obligated to send his ex-wife, which amounted to $700 a month. On the night of May 28, 1981, Christine and Fred's 11-year-old son was startled awake by strange noises in the dark. When he opened his eyes, he saw a masked intruder attempting to tie him up. The stranger wore gloves, a green tracksuit, and a ski mask, with red hair pulled back into a ponytail. Terrified, the boy screamed, startling the intruder. As the figure fled, they shouted threats. The boy immediately ran to his mother's room, only to discover Christine bound to the bed with her mouth taped shut. She had been shot in the chest. The boy called for an ambulance and the police, but by the time help arrived, it was too late. Christine, just 30 years old, had died from a gunshot wound that pierced her chest and grazed her heart, causing fatal blood loss. Her children were unharmed. Forensic investigators quickly examined the home. There were no signs of forced entry, nor was anything missing. While some families in the area occasionally left their doors unlocked, Christine's sons insisted they always locked up, leading detectives to suspect that the killer may have had a key and was familiar with the household. Fred was informed of the tragedy while on duty. A colleague picked him up and drove him to the house, where he saw Christine's body. Fred insisted he had nothing to do with the murder. Later that night, back at Lori's apartment, Fred showed his colleague his service revolver. With only a cursory glance, the colleague claimed the gun hadn't been fired recently. Seems to have cleared the doubts about Fred. But when the revolver was properly tested, ballistics confirmed it was the weapon used to kill Christine. Despite this, investigators soon turned their attention not to Fred, but to Lori Bembenek. Detectives believed Lori had a motive: resentment toward Christine, whom she blamed for Fred's costly child support payments. Lori also had potential access to Christine's home. Fred had secretly copied his eldest son's house key, which, investigators argued, could have ended up in Lori's possession. This theory suggested she could have entered the house undetected. Lori, however, denied the accusations, stating she had gone to bed early that night. But with Fred on duty and Judy asleep, no one could corroborate her alibi. Christine's 11-year-old son described the intruder as a male figure with red hair and a ponytail, dressed in a green tracksuit and black shoes. Lori was a blonde and did not own a wig. Yet just days later, a bizarre discovery shifted the case. When plumbers were called to unclog Lori's apartment drain, they found a red wig lodged in the pipes. Lori swore she had never seen it and had no idea how it got there. Police then searched her apartment and uncovered a green tracksuit, closely matching the description of the intruder's clothing. With this evidence, detectives believed they had their suspect. On June 24, 1981, less than a month after Christine's death, Lori Bembenek was arrested for murder. From the start, Lori insisted she was being framed by the Milwaukee police as revenge for her earlier discrimination complaints. Still, her inability to produce a solid alibi severely weakened her case. Her refusal to take a lie detector test further fueled suspicion. Lori explained her decision by citing her time in law enforcement, where she had seen firsthand that polygraphs were unreliable and could be manipulated, even though lie detector results weren't admissible in court. Her refusal, while logical, was not well received. At the time, Lori was working as a security officer at the Marquette University. Investigators searched her locker and seized a comb for forensic testing. The FBI later claimed that hair recovered from the crime scene was microscopically similar to strands found on Lori's comb. With this, detectives announced they had enough evidence to charge her with first-degree murder. Lori Bembenek's trial for the first-degree murder of Christine Schultz was set for February 1982. Until then, Lori remained free on bond, awaiting trial under intense public scrutiny. The case quickly became a national sensation, and the relentless press attention transformed her into a reluctant celebrity. Every detail of her life, her looks, her clothes, her past, was splashed across headlines. Reporters even saddled her with the nickname Bambi, a play on her last name, which they despised for its mocking undertone. As the trial neared, two of Lori's closest connections turned against her. Her former best friend and roommate, Judy Tsess, emerged as a key witness for the prosecution. Once inseparable, they had fallen out after their dismissal from law enforcement. On the stand, Judy claimed Lori harbored deep hatred toward Christine and had often threatened to kill her. She further alleged that Lori had purchased a red wig in the weeks leading up to the murder. Judy's testimony was riddled with inconsistencies. particularly with timelines. But the discrepancies received little weight in court. Lori's estranged husband, Fred Schultz, also dealt her a crushing blow. No longer loyal to her, and already living with another woman, Fred testified against Lori, contradicting his earlier statements about his whereabouts on the night of the murder. He now claimed he had been at a bar, not off duty at home. The jury also heard about his prior accidental shooting of a fellow officer, though he had been cleared of wrongdoing. Other witnesses came forward with damning claims that Lori had repeatedly talked about killing Christine, that she had once offered someone money to carry out the crime, and that she owned a green tracksuit similar to the one worn by the intruder. A store clerk testified that Lori had purchased a wig resembling the one found in her apartment's plumbing, and forensic experts reported that wig fibers matched those at the crime scene. The prosecution's portrait of Lori was harsh, a vain, ambitious young woman who, obsessed with Fred's money and resentful of Christine, wanted her out of the picture so she could enjoy Fred's house without the burden of child support. The defense, by contrast, argued that Lori had no desire to raise Fred's children and insisted she was the victim of a frame-up. Lori herself claimed that the Milwaukee Police Department had conspired against her as retaliation for her efforts to expose corruption and misconduct within the force. She argued that Fred, who stood to benefit most by avoiding alimony, regaining his home, and gaining custody of his children, was the one with the true motive. But the jury was unmoved. On March 9, 1982, after a highly publicized trial, 22-year-old Lori Bembenek was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. 2 years later, she and Fred divorced. Prison life did not break Lori. She studied law, contributed artwork to the prison newspaper, and clung to the hope of overturning her conviction. Through a fellow inmate, she began corresponding with Dominic Guglielmo, the brother of another prisoner. Their relationship blossomed into romance, and Dominic became her most steadfast supporter. On July 15, 1990, after 8 years behind bars, Lauria made a daring escape. She slipped out through a laundry room window, scaled a barbed wire fence, and fled into the night, where Dominic waited with a getaway car. Together, they crossed into Canada, posing as a married couple while evading authorities. Meanwhile, troubling new evidence began to surface. A fellow prisoner, Freddie Horenberger, allegedly confessed to killing Christine at Fred Schultz's request, though he refused to testify publicly. Judy, Lori's former friend, later recanted her testimony, admitting she had been pressured by police and never truly believed Lori was guilty. Additional revelations cast further doubt on the case. Moreover, Fred had been granted immunity in exchange for his testimony, an arrangement not revealed during the trial. With these revelations, the theory that Lori had been framed gained traction. Her prison break only amplified the public fascination with her case. Far from being vilified, Lori gained an army of supporters. Sympathizers wore T-shirts declaring, "Run, Bambi, run," raised money for private investigators and legal fees, and formed clubs dedicated to clearing her name. For many, she came to symbolize the dangers of corruption, sexism, and injustice in the criminal justice system. At this point, problems with the initial investigation were becoming clear. The wig, a central piece of prosecution evidence, was far from conclusive. Having been retrieved from a sewer, it was likely contaminated, and the store clerk's testimony about Lori purchasing such a wig was shaky at best. Even more damaging to the case, Judy, the prosecution's star witness, had since recanted her testimony, admitting she had been pressured by police and had personal conflicts with Lori before the murder. Without Judy's account, much of the state's case against Lori unraveled. Authorities had also leaned heavily on the testimony of Sean, Christine's eldest son, who claimed he saw the intruder. But Sean described the perpetrator as a man, taller and more heavily built than Lori, with a low, growling male voice. Years later, as an adult, Sean repeated in interviews that there was no way he could have mistaken the figure he saw for a woman. Nevertheless, investigators brushed aside this detail. After escaping from prison, Lori and Dominic crossed the Canadian border, eventually reaching Thunder Bay, Ontario. Life on the run was far harsher than they had imagined. With no money, their relationship quickly frayed. Lori struggled to survive, finding work as a waitress under the alias Jennifer Gazana and dyeing her hair to avoid recognition. When that wasn't enough, she picked up a second job as a fitness instructor. Dominic, however, grew despondent. He refused to work, spent their limited funds on hunting and fishing gear, passed his days outdoors with new acquaintances. Lori's efforts to hold their new life together came crashing down when a television program aired a segment on America's Most Wanted Fugitives. A restaurant customer recognized her and tipped off authorities. On October 17, 1990, Canadian police arrested Dominic and Lori. Dominic was extradited to the United States, where he served 3.5 months for aiding the escape, before abandoning Lori altogether. Lori, meanwhile, fought desperately to remain in Canada. She portrayed herself as a political refugee, a woman persecuted and wrongfully imprisoned, and even passed a polygraph test to support her claim of innocence. But United States authorities pressed for her return, and eventually Canadian officials agreed, on the condition that she receive a new trial. This sparked a reinvestigation that revealed numerous flaws in the original Milwaukee police inquiry. Evidence handling had been sloppy, investigative leads were ignored, and much of the state's case rested on circumstantial claims. Still, Lori's defense team feared that a full acquittal was unlikely. The prosecution, too, faced difficulties, with little credible evidence left to rely on. On December 9, 1992, Lauria struck a deal. In an unusual arrangement, she entered a plea of no contest, securing a reduced sentence of 20 years with parole eligibility. Because of the time she had already served, she was released directly from the courtroom. For the next decade, she lived under strict parole conditions, checking in regularly with authorities to avoid being sent back to prison. Freedom, however, came at a heavy price. Years of incarceration had left deep scars. Lori, once strikingly beautiful, had visibly aged, struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder, and turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism, which spiraled into dependency. She spoke openly about end-her-own-life thoughts as she battled emotional turmoil and crippling debt. Over $2 million in legal expenses forced her into bankruptcy. Her story, however, continued to captivate the public. Lori appeared on talk shows, became the subject of multiple books, and even published her own autobiography, Woman on the Run. She tried to capitalize on her notoriety by selling her artwork and briefly opened a gallery, but disaster struck again when a fire destroyed nearly all her paintings. Lori suspected the blaze was the work of vengeful police officers struggling to rebuild. She found herself virtually unemployable due to her fame and notoriety. Eventually, she left Milwaukee behind, relocating to Vancouver to live with her parents and escape the constant reminder of her turbulent past. In August 2002, Lori Bembenek's probation period finally ended. Soon after, she petitioned the court to allow DNA testing on the evidence used against her. Items like Christine Schultz's blood-stained bedding, the bullet removed from her body, clothing, and the red wig fibers. But the tests would cost tens of thousands of dollars, far beyond Lori's reach. Then, in November 2002, Lori received an unusual offer. A television program, Dr. Phil, dedicated to investigating cold cases, invited her to appear on their show, and even offered to cover the $20,000 cost of advanced DNA testing. The producers insisted on re-examining the bullet and made it clear all results would be compared with Lori's own DNA profile. At the time, she was 44 years old. During filming, Lori was housed in a private apartment and given security because of the media frenzy surrounding her case. But instead of feeling free, she felt trapped once again. Overwhelmed by anxiety, she suffered a panic attack and, in desperation, jumped out of a window. The fall left her with devastating injuries, leading to the amputation of her leg below the knee. The show was abruptly canceled. Lori later sued the program, claiming she had been wrongfully confined. But the court rejected her lawsuit. She also attempted to reopen her case, hoping to prove her innocence. But since she had previously agreed not to challenge the conviction, her petitions were denied. Her lawyers still fought for her, arguing that key evidence had been suppressed during the original trial. A ballistics test suggested the fatal bullet did not match Lori Bembenek's gun. Male DNA was also found on Christine's body, pointing to abuse assault. Even Christine's eldest son continued to insist Lori was not the killer. He claimed to have seen a man at the crime scene. Despite all of this, the appeals went nowhere. Life eventually brought Lori to Vancouver, where she met Marty Carson, a Forest Service worker. They married in 2005, but her years of struggle took a toll. In 2010, Lori was diagnosed with hepatitis, and on November 20, at just 52 years old, she died of liver and kidney failure. Until her final breath, Lori maintained her innocence. On a Sunday afternoon in Tijeras, New Mexico, loud explosions shattered the silence. After the noises stopped, they heard a dog yelp, and then silence. It was clear something awful was occurring inside a house. Later, a young man emerged from the house to speak with police, and his statements, along with what the police discovered, shocked the entire community. Join us as we explore this case further, revealing disturbing truth secrets, lies, and a courtroom drama where the distinction between innocence and guilt became more complicated than anyone imagined. The Mestre family wasn't well known in Tijeras, New Mexico, but those who knew them considered them quiet and reserved. The family, consisting of Raimundo Mestre, the father, Bertha Huerta Conde, the mother, their three children, Nancy, Adlai, and Brielle. They had moved to the small community around 2021. They rented a house with a large, private yard, and it quickly became one of their favorite things about the house. Raimundo was a hard-working man devoted to his family. Bertha, his wife, was a kind, caring homemaker, well-liked by their neighbors and friends. By 2024, their oldest daughter, Nancy, had moved in with her partner and was pregnant with her first child. As autumn neared, the entire family eagerly awaited the baby's arrival. However, their joy was short-lived. A sudden and tragic event was about to turn their happiness into grief. On Sunday, the 13th of October, just before 2:00 p.m., emergency services received a call from a concerned man. He explained that he had heard several loud bangs at Mestre house next door. They sounded like gunshots to him, 5 or 6 in all, followed by a single gunshot about 10 minutes later. He also thought he heard the distressed cries of a dog. At first, he thought he might be overreacting, but when he tried to reach their family by phone and got no answer, his anxiety grew. He walked to the house and rang the doorbell several times, but there was still no answer. That's when he decided it was time to call the police. Around 2:14 p.m., officers arrived and their body cameras began recording. As they approached the house, they had no idea what they were about to encounter. They knocked on the door. After a few moments of silence, a disoriented and unsteady young man, 24-year-old Adlai, answered. He chillingly stated his family had attacked him. When asked for more information, he said the attack occurred in his bedroom and a knife was used. The officers told him to come closer. When they asked if he had any weapons, Adlai said yes, and then seemed to reach for something. The officers immediately told him to turn around so they could restrain and search him. Adlai complied. While still in handcuffs, he was asked to recount the events. This time, he stated that his father and sister had attempted to kill him. He claimed his father tried to stab him in the heart with a knife, while his sister held a meat tenderizer. He then confessed, without pausing, that he had killed them both. This was just the start of a story that would become increasingly disturbing and bizarre. Suddenly, Adlai's words quickly became meaningless and incomprehensible. His sentences were disconnected, dreamlike, and made no sense, leaving the officers unsure if he was confessing or simply rambling incoherently. After searching him, officers found a gun in his pants pocket. He gave it to them willingly. They then placed him in the patrol car. The police continued to search the house. At the door, they ordered anyone inside to raise their hands and come out. But no one did. That's when they noticed the first signs of what they were truly dealing with: dark reddish stains on the entryway floor. The patterns were unmistakable. Something violent had happened here. While waiting for backup, the officers began piecing together the grim picture forming before them. Once backup arrived, they entered the house. Inside, they found a disturbing scene. Blood droplets were splattered on the walls, and a trail of blood led upstairs, soaking into the carpet. This suggested that someone had been dragged up the stairs. They also found a severely injured dog, which explained some of the blood. After searching every room, they found no sign of the family. The search then moved to the backyard, where they quickly spotted more drag marks leading away from the house. But the yard was vast, stretching far beyond the officers' immediate line of sight. One officer returned to the patrol car, hoping Adlai could narrow down the search area. When police approached Adlai, the boy immediately begged not to be harmed. The officer calmed him, explaining they only needed to know the location of his family. Instead of answering, Adlai asked if the officer had seen his dog, sounding strangely excited. The officer repeated his question about Adlai's family. Adlai finally confessed that the bodies were in the backyard. He then directed the officer to where the bodies were. The search team received the information and quickly found the bodies of the Pardis, of Clordes, 46-year-old Raimundo, 51-year-old Bertha, and 17-year-old Brielle. Adlai's confession to ending their lives was, at least in this detail, the truth. After confirming the deaths, police took Adlai in for questioning. He claimed the bodies were convulsing and foaming at the mouth, and that their wounds had somehow healed. Then, Adlai launched into another nonsensical story, this time involving seismic waves, the Big Ben clock tower, a submarine, and an unknown woman. The detective let him talk for a few minutes before handing him a pen and a piece of paper and asking him to write down his story. Adlai readily agreed. It was at this point the detective understood this interrogation would be far from typical. After informing Adlai of his rights and making sure he understood them, the detective asked him again about the fate of his family. Ultimately, he confessed to shooting their dog. The animal was rushed for emergency veterinary care, suffering from 3 gunshot wounds. Despite the efforts to save it, the injuries were too severe, and the dog had to be euthanized. Back at the crime scene, investigators recovered a mop soaked with reddish stains. In the interrogation room, the detective continued to press for specifics, asking Adlai where his father had been during the attack and where he had delivered the fatal blows. At first, Adlai's words were nonsensical. Eventually, he stated that his father had been in the living room when he sustained the fatal injuries. Although officers had already located bullet casings inside the house, they also found other evidence: a meat tenderizing hammer stained with blood and a bladed weapon. This combination of clues led them to speculate on the sequence of the killings, but Adlai's statements only deepened the mystery. During the home search, officers found documents from September, just weeks before, showing that Adlai had recently been discharged from a mental health facility. He had been treated there for psychosis. The records mentioned he experienced hallucinations and heard voices. Officers photographed these documents as evidence. Later, when asked what he did with the bodies after killing them, Adlai answered with chilling calm, showing no sign of remorse. He said he had intended to bury them. Among Adlai's incoherent written notes, The detective found disturbing references to possession by dark forces and claims that his family had tried to curse him. It became clear there might be far more to his mental state than he was revealing. Left alone again, his behavior became stranger still. At one point, he appeared to hold a conversation with someone who wasn't there. Then, in an unsettling turn, he urinated into a plastic bottle. When the detective returned and realized Adlai's actions, he reprimanded him, telling him he could ask to go to the bathroom. Once more, the detective stepped out, instructing him to behave himself, but Adlai showed no signs of calming down. Instead, his erratic behavior escalated to a disturbing level. He began shouting to God, then suddenly turned to address the men in the room. Rising to his feet, he moved in a way that, captured on camera, would mark the moment the situation took a sharp, alarming turn. Without warning, Adlai began violently kicking the wall of the interrogation room. Within moments, he had created a hole large enough to squeeze through. Escaping into the hallway, he made a direct path toward the elevators. The noise drew the attention of deputies, who intercepted him just seconds later. It became clear that the walls of the sheriff's office were never designed to hold someone determined to break out. Deciding it was too risky to keep him inside, they placed him in the back of a patrol car to let him calm down. Once he appeared more settled, Adlai was brought back inside for processing photographs, a buccal DNA swab, and the collection of his clothing. He was issued a temporary jumpsuit and escorted back to the patrol vehicle. This time, the destination was the county jail. Upon arrival, he was placed in an intake holding cell. Investigators found Adlai's sister, Nancy, and had the difficult job of informing her that most of her family had been murdered in a shockingly violent way. She became visibly upset, sobbing, and struggled to understand what was happening. In a later interview with detectives, Nancy explained why Adlai might have brought up possession. She was both disbelieving and angry as she described how her family had minimized or excused Adlai's strange behavior. This was partly because their mother believed Adlai was possessed and not accountable for his actions. However, Nancy disagreed with this explanation, believing that there had been significant warning signs that were ignored. Nancy also told detectives that at the time Adlai was released from the hospital, mental health professionals concluded that he was not a danger to himself or others, and that he had never mentioned any intention of harming his family. When asked about his medication, Nancy confirmed he was prescribed treatment, but admitted he was not taking it consistently. She had confronted him about it herself, worried for his well-being. She said she wasn't the only one. Her mother had even found pills in the trash. Everyone in the household had urged him to take his medication. Despite these issues, Nancy said her brother had appeared normal for months leading up to the killings. Authorities later confirmed that the firearm believed to be the murder weapon was legally registered to their mother. On Monday, the 14th of October, the sheriff held a press conference calling the case highly complex and in need of thorough analysis. He disclosed Adlai's medical history and shared key investigative findings. The sheriff also raised concerns about the state's red flag gun laws, measures that allow authorities to temporarily remove firearms from individuals deemed a danger to themselves or others, suggesting that such intervention might have prevented the tragedy. The neighbor who had first called 911, it spoke to reporters as well, still shaken. He said he had never noticed anything alarming about the family and remembered them only as kind and friendly. On Friday, the 18th of October, 5 days after the murders, Adlai appeared in court for his initial hearing. One of the responding officers testified, describing the scene as brutal. Prosecutors told the judge they had recovered 10 9mm shell casings from the property, and that the victims also showed signs of blunt force trauma. The state played security footage from the sheriff's office, showing Adlai breaking through the wall during his attempted escape. Though calmer that day, the sight of the video prompted him to interrupt his own attorney, insisting he wanted to speak. Ignoring his lawyer's advice, he loudly claimed his medication had been stolen and that he had tried to escape because he was afraid. He repeated strange claims about his parents and sister, saying that they spewed strange liquids from their mouths and urged the media to release forensic photographs to prove he was telling the truth and that he had acted only to save his own life. End of trial. Adlai Mestre was formally charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 4 counts of evidence tampering, 1 count of extreme cruelty to animals, 1 count of escape from police custody, and 1 count of criminal damage to public property. His attorney argued for supervised release with proper medication, but the judge sided with prosecutors, ruling that Adlai was a danger to the community and ordering him held without bond. Months later, in April 2025, a judge declared Adlai incompetent to stand trial and ordered him transferred to a mental health facility for treatment. His competency will be evaluated again in the future. For now, no updates have been released, and it is presumed that he remains hospitalized, awaiting the court's final decision. Now that the full scope of this harrowing case is known, the question remains: will the justice system ultimately bring closure to the Mestre family? Or will investigative challenges, mental health complexities, and systemic gaps in firearm regulation leave the truth forever clouded? In life, finding a true friend is like grabbing a lifeline. Someone who stands by you through every storm, who protects your secrets, and who becomes your family when your own flesh and blood turn away. But what happens when that bond, the very trust that once saved you, transforms into the sharpest betrayal imaginable? Tonight's story isn't just about friendship, it's about a loyalty so twisted it became lethal, a trust so broken it ended in horror. At the center of the story is Misty Mayo, a young mother who thought she had found a sister in Christine Smith. However, she was faced with an unimaginable betrayal, and it ultimately cost her her life. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear is not just a crime. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the person you trust the most can be the one who destroys you. Springtown, Texas, is a small town known for its peaceful lifestyle, and it is where Christine Smith grew up as the middle child in a family of 5. Her childhood was carefree until tragedy struck when her father died when she was just 10 years old. This loss deeply affected Christine, especially since she had always been close to her father. After some time, her mother started dating another man, and they quickly got married. She struggled to accept her stepfather, feeling that he could never replace her dad. As she entered her teenage years, her relationship with her mother also became strained. By the age of 14, she was acting out, feeling increasingly isolated and unsupported. She craved understanding and connection. Misty Mayo grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, not far from Springtown. As a child, she liked the city. Unaware of its dangers, her protective family kept a close watch on her. But crime was prevalent in Fort Worth, influencing some of her siblings' lives. This challenging environment has shaped her strong and fearless personality. She was known for speaking her mind, often appearing rude to strangers but being genuine and brave. While Christine came from a large family, Misty's was even bigger, with 7 children in total. Being one of the youngest, Misty had to assert herself to be heard, which helped her build confidence. Her family eventually moved to Springtown, attracted by its quieter atmosphere, which was suitable for raising children. Misty adapted quickly to her new town and started attending high school, where she met Christine, who was a year younger. Despite being different, they became fast friends, spending all their free time together. Christine was calm and reserved, while Misty was bold and somewhat aggressive. However, their shared interests in music and fashion helped them bond, even dressing alike at times. As Christine's struggles with her stepfather intensified in high school, she decided to run away from home in early 1999. She confided in Misty, who supported her. They skipped school to plan their escape, but Misty's brothers found them and brought them back home. Christine continued to feel uncomfortable living with her stepfather, which led her to spend more time at Misty's household, where she was welcomed as a part of the family. Meanwhile, Christine's behavior deteriorated as she entered adolescence. She began dating a boy whom her family disapproved of, particularly due to his race. They believed she was trying to provoke them. Christine insisted that she loved him. At 15, she discovered she was pregnant while still in that relationship. When her family found out, they were furious, especially when she refused to have an abortion. Ultimately, they threw her out of the house. Christine turned to her best friend, Misty, for support during a challenging time. Misty's family welcomed Christine without any judgment about her pregnancy or personal life. Misty stood by her throughout, but unfortunately, she experienced a miscarriage. In the year that followed, Misty discovered she was pregnant while in a relationship with a local guy named Stephen Gullns, who was notorious among friends for his disturbing nickname, the Psychopath. This title wasn't unfounded. He had a troubled background, including substance addiction and involvement in criminal activities. Despite the family's concerns that Stephen wouldn't be a good father, Misty loved him, and they respected her independence. By spring 2000, Misty was ready to have her baby just after her 18th birthday. She named her son Dante, and Christine was there for her throughout the hospital stay. Right after Misty was discharged, she faced a challenge because Stephen, Dante's biological father, lived in Fort Worth and had no intention of moving. Misty felt it was important for Dante to be close to his father, so she decided to move back to the city. Her family supported her decision, although they did not want her to return to her old environment. Determined, Misty moved to Fort Worth with her baby to be with Stephen, believing she would be safe with him. Despite his drug addiction, Stephen made an effort to shield Misty and their baby from harmful influences, genuinely concerned about their well-being. While he was connected to gangs, Misty was focused solely on motherhood and was trying to find a job despite her incomplete education. Misty was not surprised when Christine wanted to move to Fort Worth with her. Christine was willing to drop out of school to find a job to help support her family. Misty, feeling lost without her best friend in Springtown, agreed, and they decided to live together with Dante. After moving in, Misty quickly found a job, which made her life easier. Stephen was inconsistent in his presence, sometimes staying with them when he had nowhere else to go. Christine and Misty enjoyed their time together, with Christine helping care for Dante, reducing the need for a babysitter. Their friendship deepened, resembling that of sisters. As time passed, they settled into their new life in Fort Worth and made many friends. Christine hoped to find a nice guy and start a family like Misty did. In April 2000, she began dating a man named Robert Ramon Fuller. On December 5, 2000, Robert and his friend Jamie Demon Nickerson came over to spend time with Christine, bringing along a girl named Edwana Barrow Williams. Though Misty was fine with their gathering, she chose to step away and spend time in another room with her boyfriend and son. Jamie and Robert visited to drink and chat, but were secretly planning to rob the nearby tire shop. Christine agreed to join them, but only as a lookout for police or passers-by. She wouldn't participate in the theft itself. While Jamie and Robert smashed the shop's display case and entered, Christine and Edwana stayed in the alley, keeping watch from a distance. Within minutes, Jamie and Robert stole computers, discs, and tires from the shop. They needed to hide the stolen items before selling them, so they returned to the apartment together. Meanwhile, Misty is sleeping in another room with Stephen and her son, completely unaware of the robbery taking place just outside. Once back at the apartment, the group excitedly stored their stolen loot and threw a loud party to celebrate. Misty woke up to find unfamiliar items piled up in the living room. When she learned where they came from, she became furious and demanded that the stolen goods be removed. She didn't want to be an accomplice and feared for Stephen, her boyfriend, who had a troubled past with the law. They agreed to remove the items. Misty returned to bed, while Stephen stayed to help move the stolen goods. Unfortunately, despite Misty and Stephen's concerns, not everything was taken away. Stephen helped transport some of the items to Robert's car, but insisted on removing the rest. The group, however, had nowhere to store the items. They persuaded Stephen to let them keep the stolen goods in the apartment temporarily until they could sell them. The next morning, Misty saw the stolen items again and was angry. Although Stephen calmed her down, she was upset to learn that Christine was involved in the robbery. Misty couldn't understand how her calm friend could participate in something so wrong and just wanted everything to be resolved quickly. She was aware that using her apartment as a storage space for stolen goods could lead to severe consequences. The group's biggest issue, however, was witnesses to the crime. On December 6, while Misty was out grocery shopping, she saw police investigating the robbery scene and became worried. She feared being implicated in the crime. On her way back, she noticed police questioning witnesses who described 4 young men moving items into the same apartment building Misty had entered. Realizing how serious the situation was, she decided not to stay quiet. An hour after returning home, the police knocked on Misty's door. She didn't deny anything and let them in, where they quickly spotted the stolen items. Just then, Christine and Edwana arrived at the apartment, which proved advantageous for the detectives as they began questioning both girls. They matched the eyewitness descriptions. Edwana claimed she had never committed a crime and was only watching from the alley to alert them if she saw police. When the detectives questioned Christine next, she initially tried to protect Robert by misleading the police. However, they saw through Christine's lies and threatened to arrest Misty since the stolen items were found in her apartment. This prompted Christine to confess that Misty was innocent. She had been asleep with her son and boyfriend in another room, unaware of the theft. Christine also admitted, like Edwana, that she had acted as a lookout outside the tire shop. Christine chose to be completely honest and revealed that Stephen assisted in moving some of the stolen items, but she stressed that he was not involved in the robbery itself. This could create serious issues for Misty, as her boyfriend, Stephen, has a criminal history that could lead to him facing additional charges just for loading the stolen goods into Robert's car. Under Texas law, this action could be classified as a third-degree crime, punishable by 6 months to 2 years in prison if no one was harmed. Fortunately, because Christine and Edwana cooperated with the police, Stephen was not arrested after the interrogation. The police then went to Jamien's home. Meanwhile, Christine felt compelled to inform her boyfriend, Robert, about what was happening. He was with Jamien at the time. Christine and Edwana were immediately curious to know how law enforcement found out and why they were on the scene. They soon visited Robert to discuss the matter. Here, Jamien and Robert ask questions as if they are interrogating. Frustrated by the questions, Christine eventually left, which only led Jamien and Robert to suspect that she had informed the police. This suspicion escalated when Christine, as a atar, feeling anxious, told Jamien and Robert that the police had confronted them while they were at a mutual friend's apartment. After speaking with Christine and Edwana, Jamien and Robert became convinced that Misty was the one who reported them. Although it was unclear who initially called the police to investigate the tire shop, Edwana later confirmed it was Misty. Unbeknownst to her, Misty was in danger. She merely wanted to distance herself from the entire situation. Angry with Christine, Misty chose to unwind by going to dinner with her boyfriend, Stephen, on December 7, 2000. The following day, Misty discussed the robbery and its implications in a more casual atmosphere with friends. At 9:00 p.m. that evening, Stephen waited at a restaurant for Misty, who was unusually late. When he could no longer wait, he went to her apartment, only to find both her and their child missing. Faced with this unsettling situation, and knowing his friends were under investigation for robbery, he went to the police for help. Detectives quickly launched a search, but it yielded no leads. They first interviewed Misty's best friend, Christine. Hoping she could provide information on Misty's whereabouts, Christine recounted a bizarre story about Misty being attacked in an alley and fleeing with her 4-month-old son. However, Christine later changed her story, claiming she didn't know where Misty was, which raised suspicions. The police believed Christine was hiding something and continued pressing for the truth. Ultimately, after 8 days of keeping the secret, Christine's conscience compelled her to confess at the police station on December 15. She revealed that Misty was dead and assisted authorities in locating Misty's body in Shreveport, Louisiana. Christine led detectives to a field where they discovered human remains, partially destroyed by animals. This remains has been examined by forensic experts and confirmed to be that of Misty. She had suffered severe beatings, with multiple head and facial injuries. In addition to defensive wounds, the cause of death was determined to be strangulation. Christine provided a detailed account of the events. On the evening of December 7, she, Edwana, and Robert had plans to meet Stephen and Jamian for dinner. They intended to pick up Misty and her baby from her apartment and drove in Misty's car since the car used for transporting the stolen items was hidden. Christine, Edwana, and Misty sat in the back seat, while Jamian drove and Robert sat in the front passenger seat. Instead of going to the restaurant, the group steered toward a secluded park on the outskirts, while Christine was holding Misty's baby, Dante, on her lap. Jamian and Robert attacked her. They physically assaulted her with a knife and a baton. Robert claimed he wanted to teach Misty a lesson and pressured Christine to join in the attack. Eventually, out of anger towards her friend, Christine complied. During questioning later on, she admitted her actions stemmed from her frustrations with Misty. Christine was worried that their revenge would lead to everyone being arrested. She didn't believe anyone would actually kill Misty and was uncertain about how the situation would end. At one point, Misty asked Christine if they were going to kill her, to which Robert cruelly replied, "Yes." Despite Misty's pleas for Christine to stop the assault and not harm Dante, Christine remained silent. Misty fought back fiercely, trying to escape the car. In response, the attackers used duct tape to bind her, but during the struggle, she tore the tape off and screamed for help. They attempted to silence her again, but she continued to resist until they hit her so hard that she lost consciousness. When Misty was incapacitated, they used tape to bind her mouth and nose. Fearing the worst, Christine, still holding Dante, checked if Misty was breathing and panicked when she didn't feel any air. Realizing Misty was dying, the attackers drove to a remote field in Shreveport, Louisiana, where they buried her body, stripped her of her clothes, and covered her with machine oil to prevent identification. Meanwhile, Dante was unharmed. He was simply left in a van outside a Dallas restaurant, where Child Protective Services later rescued him and placed him in foster care. After the incident, the group went to a diner to eat and chat, acting as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Stephen, Misty's boyfriend, I was waiting for her at the restaurant. When she didn't arrive, he informed her family, and together they began searching for her before contacting the police. During this time, Christine exhibited unusual behavior but continued making up stories out of fear for her own safety. During her interrogation, Christine provided details about the crime, the motives, and the identities of the other conspirators. She admitted her role in the conspiracy, hoping for some recognition for ensuring Dante's safety at Misty's request, but instead felt overwhelming guilt for not helping Misty, who had always supported her. After the trial, Christine was sentenced to life in prison. She expressed remorse and sought forgiveness from Misty's family during the trial, but her efforts were met with rejection. She was viewed as a traitor. Misty had helped her through difficult times, yet she did not attempt to save Misty when it mattered. All the co-conspirators were arrested, and subsequent trials resulted in life sentences for Jamian Demon Nickerson and Robert Ramon Fuller, while Edwana Barrow Williams received a lesser sentence of 30 years for unclear reasons. Since her imprisonment, Christine has filed several appeals for parole, all of which have been denied. Nevertheless, she continues to seek a lighter sentence and has spoken to journalists about her remorse, claiming she would do anything to reverse the events. In one interview, she mentioned that Misty visited her in a dream and expressed forgiveness for her. That night, in a quiet house in Pink Hill, the police discovered a horrifying scene on a dirty mattress covered in blood and feces. A woman lay shivering, half naked, her whole body covered in wounds. Her eyes were bloodshot, her jaw was swollen, her toes were broken, and her breathing was so weak that it was almost non-existent. In the air, the smell of alcohol and cigarettes was strong. Death was quietly knocking at the door. That woman was Melissa Mims, once a lively, adventurous girl who always made her friends smile. But now, after years of alcohol, violence, and a ruthless boyfriend's control, her life had ended in tragedy. Joey Tyndall, the only person she had ever lived with, simply said it was all an accident. But was it really an accident, or was there a much darker truth behind it? Watch this video to find out what path led Melissa from a brilliant youth to a suspicious death, and whether justice will ever be found for her. Melissa Mims was born in Houston, Texas, to parents Michael and Marion. She has 3 siblings, a brother named Michael Jr., and 2 sisters, Maria and Michelle. Growing up, Melissa was known for her adventurous nature and her desire to try new things, which often landed her in trouble but also made her the life of the party. As an adult, Melissa moved from Texas to Jacksonville, North Carolina. There, she met a man who eventually became her husband, and she became Melissa Platt. In October 1995, she gave birth to her first daughter, Brianna, and in July 2003, she welcomed her second child, Chassid. Unfortunately, her marriage ended in divorce in 2005, which brought on many challenges as she struggled to adapt to her new situation. In 2004, Melissa got into legal trouble for writing bad checks and was convicted in 2005 and placed on probation. During this time, she began to drink alcohol as a way to cope, which only worsened her problems. It was ultimately decided that her daughters would be better off living with a relative because she was unable to care for them properly. While working at an auto parts store in Jacksonville in 2006, Melissa met Joey Tyndall, a truck driver. Despite being a few years older than her, they quickly connected and began dating. Both had a shared interest in alcohol, and their life together revolved around drinking. Often at their home in Pink Hill, Melissa confided to her family that when Joey mixed alcohol with Paxil, an antidepressant, he became violent. Over time, she recognized that her drinking was worsening her mental health and personal issues. Feeling overwhelmed, she reached out to her family in Texas for help. Admitting she was not in control of her alcohol use and that Joey pressured her to drink. In light of her struggles, Melissa decided to check herself into the Onslow County Behavioral Health Clinic in Jacksonville for help with her alcohol addiction. Unfortunately, she left the clinic just a few days later because Joey was sending her threatening messages, claiming he would break up with her if she continued seeking help. This was not the first time Joey manipulated her. He had kicked her out of the house several times, forcing her to sleep in her car. Despite Melissa's family's pleas for her to return to Texas and end her relationship with Joey, she felt trapped due to his manipulation. On Wednesday, the 8th of October, her mother, Marion, grew concerned about her and contacted her probation officer. She was in regular contact with her mother and 2 sisters. However, days had passed and they had not seen or heard from her, which was very strange. They began calling her multiple times a day but received no response. When Joey answered, he made excuses for why Melissa couldn't come to the phone. Worried about her safety, Marion and Melissa's sisters made 4 to 5 calls each night, only to be met with more excuses from Joey. Eventually, he turned off Melissa's phone and disconnected her voicemail, deepening her family's fears. Melissa's family was deeply concerned about Joey's behavior and suspected foul play. After Marion contacted Melissa's probation officer, he decided to drive to Joey and Melissa's home in Pink Hill, North Carolina, to ensure that Melissa was safe and out of trouble. Arriving at the house around 5:17 p.m., the probation officer knocked on the door, but there was no answer. Knowing that Melissa was unemployed, The probation officer realized that there was nowhere for her to be, so he continued his knocking. However, Melissa never responded to the door. Eventually, the probation officer's concern grew as he had observed Melissa 1 week earlier and smelled alcohol on her, indicating that she was drinking again. He worried that she might be inside the house, passed out, and in need of help. However, as a probation officer, he lacked the authority to enter the residence. Instead, he decided to call the Lenoir County Sheriff's Office for assistance. Several minutes after the probation officer's initial call for help, 2 officers from the sheriff's department arrived at the scene. However, they informed the probation officer that they were unable to break into someone's home without probable cause. They explained that contacting the homeowner, Joey Tyndall, was necessary to obtain entry into the house. One of the officers managed to get hold of Joey, who informed them that he was currently not at home, but at work. During the phone conversation with the officer, he stated that Melissa might be resting inside as she was unwell. He explained that Melissa's drinking had become increasingly out of control and mentioned that it was possible she may have passed out. He emphasized to the officer that he did not always have the ability to provide the best care for Melissa. Still, Joey said he had reached out to Melissa's mother, Marion, on multiple occasions, seeking assistance in getting her back into rehabilitation. After Joey granted the police permission to enter the house, Melissa's probation officer and 2 Lenoir County Sheriff's officers proceeded to the back of the property and entered through the back door. Once inside, the officers made their way through the house until they found what seemed to be a bedroom. Upon entering the room, the officers discovered Melissa lying motionless on her bed, covered by a blanket. Initially, the officers tried to ask Melissa if she needed help, but received no response. Upon closer examination, the officers noticed that Melissa was trying to move her body and nod her head, indicating that she was still alive. However, her condition did not appear to be stable. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the officers promptly called for an ambulance to be sent to Melissa in Joey's home. As the officers waited for the ambulance to arrive, they carefully examined the bedroom she was in. One particular detail caught their attention. The bed that Melissa was lying on had no sheets, and she was wrapped in a blanket that covered only the top half of her body. The officers noticed that Melissa was nude from the waist down, with only a shirt on. However, it was evident that the shirt was merely draped over her, exposing her head and one arm. The officers observed Melissa shaking uncontrollably. In an effort to provide some modesty and cover her to keep warm, the officers attempted to shield Melissa while they waited for their medical backup to arrive. During this time, they discovered numerous bruises on her body, each in varying stages of healing. While some bruises appeared fresh, others appeared older, indicating various instances of abuse. One of the items the officers noticed in Melissa's room was a table with 2 cups containing straws. Upon closer inspection, the officers discovered that the cups were filled with alcohol. This discovery shocked the officers, as they had anticipated finding water or juice in Melissa's condition. The smell of alcohol in the cups raised suspicions and prompted further investigation. With their suspicions heightened due to the presence of bruises on Melissa's body, the officers decided to approach her to inquire about any potential abuse. Despite her immense pain, Melissa shook her head, no, in response to their question. However, in whispers and broken words, she tried to explain to the officers that the bruises were a result of a fall she had experienced while attempting to answer her phone. Throughout her explanation, Melissa kept her eyes closed as if merely lifting her eyelids was causing her too much pain. The ambulance arrived at Melissa and Joey's house and entered through the back door. As they entered, a strong, unpleasant odor hit them. Initial reports from the emergency medical technician indicated that the smell was a mixture of cigarette smoke and bodily fluids, reminiscent of someone who had been sitting in their own waste for a long time. The paramedics approached Melissa, who was lying on the bed, and tried to ask her questions, but she did not respond. She only moved slightly when someone spoke loudly near her ear. Melissa struggled to open her eyes due to severe pain. One paramedic noticed that the mattress she was on was stained with urine, feces, and blood. He also observed that Melissa had a black eye, bruises on her neck, a swollen jaw, and blood in her eye. Upon further examination, he found that several of Melissa's toes were broken at different stages of healing. Additionally, there was bruising and bleeding in her groin area, but no signs of abuse. While paramedics assessed Melissa in Joey Tyndall's home, Joey returned from work. An officer approached him and asked how Melissa had ended up in such a poor state. Joey stated that she was clumsy and often had accidents. The officer informed him that Melissa's condition was critical and required urgent medical attention. Despite being her boyfriend and the only person taking care of her, Joey chose not to go with her to the hospital, opting instead to stay home and wait for updates. At the hospital, Melissa underwent a thorough examination that revealed she had a closed head injury. Recognizing the severity of her condition, the hospital decided they couldn't provide the specialized care she needed. So she was airlifted to Pitt Memorial Hospital in Greenville, North Carolina. There, doctors assessed her injuries and determined that police involvement was necessary. They requested the officers who found her to come to the hospital and document her injuries with photographs. The officers arrived and took pictures of Melissa. After completing their task, the case was assigned to 2 detectives. While at Pitt Memorial Hospital, a doctor performed a computed tomography scan on Melissa, which showed an intracranial hemorrhage caused by physical trauma and a broken jaw in 2 places. Due to the seriousness of her brain injury, she required emergency surgery, known as a frontal craniotomy. During the surgery, the surgeon discovered a second brain bleed, indicating a separate traumatic event. Additionally, there was evidence that Melissa had been shot in the past. Although Melissa claimed she accidentally shot herself, her loved ones suspect Joey may have been involved in that incident. The detectives assigned to her case visited Joey at his home for an interview regarding Melissa and her injuries. They asked him to show them where Melissa had fallen and to provide details about those incidents. But Joey struggled to recall specific times and dates. His answers were vague, but he did mention an incident where he woke up one night and found Melissa missing from bed. Worried, he searched outside and found her naked, asleep in her car, claiming she had injuries from running around and falling outdoors. The detectives also spoke with Melissa's probation officer, who confirmed seeing her a week before her hospitalization, noting that she had no visible bruises or injuries at that time. On November 17, 2008, Melissa underwent a second surgery, during which doctors discovered she had necrosis, a serious condition affecting the brain post-surgery. Though she regained consciousness briefly, she remained largely unresponsive. By early November, she had developed pneumonia, and by the end of the month, she needed a third surgery due to spinal fluid in her brain. Following this, she began experiencing daily seizures that escalated to occurring every few minutes. By December 17, it was clear that her health was deteriorating. After a difficult discussion, her family made the heartbreaking decision to take her off life support. After 9 weeks in the hospital, she passed away at 7:58 p.m., surrounded by her loved ones. Before her death, detective visited Melissa, but she was unable to provide coherent answers due to her condition. She told them she had been injured in a car accident, though she also admitted to being somewhat clumsy. The medical examiner determined that a brain injury caused her death, but they could not ascertain the exact circumstances. For more than a decade, Melissa's family and friends have been advocating for her death to be classified as a homicide, seeking justice for her. The day after Melissa's passing, her mother, Marion, received an anonymous call informing her of Joey Tyndall's history of domestic violence and alleged assaults on women. Other women who had encounters with Joey encouraged Melissa's family to continue pursuing charges, believing he was dangerous and needed to be apprehended. Upon discovering this information, her family began to look into Joey's past. They found out that both of Joey's marriages ended in divorce. His first marriage ended in 2001 after he reportedly pointed a gun at his ex-wife, an event corroborated by their 2 sons. His ex-wife sought a restraining order, which was dismissed by the court 6 months later. His second marriage lasted only 7 months and ended when his second wife obtained a restraining order against him due to domestic violence allegations. The judge allowed only a 1-week restraining order. Melissa's family learned that one of Joey's sons revealed that a female friend had stayed at their house and woke up to find Joey with his hands down her pants, causing her to scream in fear. The police could not find enough evidence to charge Joey in connection with Melissa's death, and they concluded he was genuinely trying to help her. In the days before her death, Joey brought her a meatloaf dinner and expressed his feelings for her, leading authorities to believe his account. A significant development in Melissa's case occurred on June 28, 2021, when a new death certificate was issued, classifying her death as a homicide. This prompted the Lenoir County Sheriff's Office to reopen the investigation. Melissa's family, who had hired a private investigator and financed their efforts through merchandise sales and GoFundMe campaigns, contacted a doctor who believed that Melissa's injuries indicated chronic physical abuse. The family credits the reopening of the case to the findings of the private investigator. For them, the change in the death certificate was a significant victory in their pursuit of justice. Melissa's sister, Michelle, expressed her emotions upon hearing the news, stating that she never expected any updates regarding her sister's death. Given the complexities of the case, Michelle emphasized that the family unanimously agreed that true justice would only come if the person responsible for Melissa's death was held accountable. On a late October night in 2022, in a small warehouse in Minnesota, a mysterious disappearance shook the whole town. Bryce Timothy Broggle, a young man who had just returned from a trip across the United States with his girlfriend, suddenly disappeared while traveling with his future father-in-law. A few days later, the police followed the clues and discovered a series of creepy details: bloodstains, signs of dragging heavy objects, a bottle of bleach with DNA on it, and finally, Bryce's body was found deep in the woods, with a bullet wound right behind his head. What really happened in that warehouse? Let's explore the whole story right now. It was a cold, misty day in the quiet Minnesota town of Center, a day that seemed like any other. But this was where Bryce was last seen. Bryce's girlfriend, Cordelia, had just returned home after traveling the country for months. She'd hoped to relax with her family in Minnesota, but instead, she found herself caught in a series of unsettling events. Soon after her return, Cordelia sensed that something wasn't right. Bryce had gone to the storage unit with her father, Michael, to drop off some belongings. The unit was only a few minutes' walk from their house, and the trip should have taken no more than half an hour. But as time passed, Bryce didn't come back. With each passing hour, Cordelia's unease grew. She tried to settle herself after her long journey, even took a shower, but the anxiety refused to fade. Later that day, Michael returned alone. He looked distressed and immediately told Cordelia that Bryce had been detained at the storage facility. Cordelia couldn't understand what was going on. Michael claimed that 2 dark gray cars had pulled up to them at the storage complex. People who appeared to be some kind of official stepped out, but they didn't show any identification or introduce themselves. Everything happened so fast that Michael didn't have a chance to question them or get a clear understanding of the situation. The individuals restrained Bryce, placed handcuffs on him, and drove away. The cars were nondescript, their headlights piercing through the growing evening fog, and Michael couldn't recall any details that might help identify them. Cordelia was shocked by the recent events. She tried to call Bryce right away, but his phone was off. She sent him texts begging him to come back and explain, but he didn't reply. Cordelia became increasingly worried as time passed. Finally, on Friday, the 28th of October, after several days of no news, she went to the Crow Wing County Sheriff's Office and reported Bryce missing. She had no additional information for the police besides Michael's confusing story. The police quickly launched an investigation. Detectives examined all the messages Cordelia had sent Bryce on the night he went missing. It was clear from the texts that she was panicking, her growing distress evident with every passing hour. What had started as a routine, missing persons case began morphing into something far darker and more complicated. Meanwhile, Michael knew the police would question him first after Cordelia reported Bryce's disappearance. So he tried to prepare. On Friday, the 28th of October, the police found Michael at a family Halloween party in Brainerd. He agreed to go with them to the storage facility and explain in detail what happened the day Bryce disappeared. There, they discovered drag marks, suggesting heavy objects had been moved, and other disturbing evidence that increased their fear about the case. As the investigation progressed, the details surrounding Bryce's disappearance became increasingly unsettling and mysterious. Filled with fear and uncertainty, after police questioned Michael, his conflicting statements raised more questions. Cordelia, who initially trusted her father, struggled to understand the increasingly strange and confusing situation. Michael recounted the events, striving to leave no detail out. He explained that he and Bryce had arrived at the storage unit in a white Ford Escape with a trailer to sort through some belongings after the lengthy road trip Bryce and Cordelia had recently taken. The task took about 45 minutes, with Bryce sorting his things to decide what to keep and what to discard. On the way to the storage, they had spoken very little. Michael asked Bryce about his and Cordelia's trip. Bryce had simply replied that the drive was fine. Both men had been quiet and distant, seemingly uninterested in making conversation. At about 5:45 p.m., as they were getting ready to leave, two dark gray cars suddenly blocked their path as they were pulling out of the storage unit. Michael noticed that the cars had flashing lights, but they weren't the usual lights found on police patrol cars. Instead, they looked like the type used on unmarked police vehicles. This seemed strange to Michael, making him question whether the people in the cars were actually law enforcement. Michael said that he and Bryce were briefly stopped by people he couldn't identify. Michael was taken back to his white Ford Escape. Bryce was put into a dark gray SUV. Michael remembered a small computer on the SUV's dashboard, but nothing else stood out inside. Michael felt the situation was well planned and involved multiple people. As the investigation continued, hints of tension within the family began to emerge. Michael admitted he was reluctant to spend time with Bryce and felt uneasy around him. Detectives found it curious why Michael had agreed to help Bryce with the storage unit at all, especially without Cordelia being present. Cordelia later explained that she had stayed home because she was exhausted from their long journey and needed time to rest. Cordelia and Bryce had set off on their road trip right after her graduation in June. For 4 months, they traveled across multiple states, exploring new places, staying in budget motels, and occasionally sleeping in their car. It was a time of freedom without constraints. But they returned early. Michael felt that something was wrong. Cordelia was acting differently. She was quiet and reserved. She had also started doing strange things, like avoiding talking when Bryce was around. After Bryce was kidnapped, Michael came home wanting answers. He spoke to Cordelia, trying to understand what was going on. Cordelia initially dismissed it, saying everything was okay and there was no danger. However, Michael felt she wasn't being truthful and was hiding something. Last March, Bryce came to stay with Cordelia's family. Almost immediately, the house felt different. At first, the changes were small. Little comments, uncomfortable silences, and strained conversations that could be seen as normal arguments. But soon, things got worse. One morning, Cordelia came downstairs with a bruise on her face. When her parents asked how she got it, she said she tripped while playfully fighting and hit her face. Michael didn't believe her, but Cordelia insisted that's what happened. Michael was increasingly worried about Cordelia. His other daughter, who was staying with them, said she'd heard Cordelia crying in her room that night. Michael knew Bryce and Cordelia's relationship was in serious trouble. Michael was constantly on edge. Michael wanted to know more about Cordelia's recent trip. She mentioned visiting Washington recently, which worried him. He remembered that Bryce's captors had mentioned Arizona, and he knew Cordelia and Bryce had been there just weeks before. These details made him think their travels were connected to something illegal. Michael also told the police that Bryce frequently used marijuana, He was worried that banned substance use might be connected to their current problems. He also pointed out that both Bryce and Cordelia carried two phones, a regular smartphone and an older phone. The police were especially interested in finding Bryce's phones because they thought they might contain important information. However, Michael didn't know where the phones were. Cordelia was also avoiding the topic of the phones and didn't want to talk about them. Investigators considered the possibility that Bryce's disappearance was planned or that he was trying to hide. Some evidence suggested it was premeditated. However, Michael didn't believe Bryce would leave willingly, especially leaving Cordelia. Michael suspected the situation was more complicated than it seemed. Cordelia told Michael that she and Bryce had planned to move back to Montana to find jobs and start fresh. But she also disclosed that Bryce was controlling. She said he tracked her phone calls and emails. Michael noticed fear in his daughter, which made him even more worried. He wanted to help her, but she wasn't ready to fully share the details of her relationship with Bryce. The investigation revealed that Bryce had been tracking Cordelia's phone. He had made her connect all her devices to his, so he could monitor her contacts, messages, and calls. Police also asked Michael to give them his phone to check his location on the Wednesday evening Bryce disappeared. Michael claimed that after leaving the storage facility, he went home, then drove to Brainerd and visited his uncle. However, his story had some inconsistencies. The situation grew increasingly complex. There were clear tensions between Bryce and Michael, who had openly expressed mistrust and dislike for him. To unravel the truth, investigators delved deeper into the Laflex family dynamics and the relationship between Bryce and Cordelia. Michael, born in 1977 in the suburbs of Brainerd, grew up in a troubled home. After his parents divorced, his mother remarried and had more children, leaving Michael to grow up with his half-siblings. After graduating from high school in 1996, he moved to the small town of Center, working in construction before becoming self-employed, taking odd jobs for neighbors. In 1990, Michael, then 21, faced his first legal problem. He pleaded guilty to third-degree criminal conduct and received a sentence of 5 years probation. This experience motivated him to change his life and avoid future trouble. However, in 2018, he was convicted of fourth-degree misconduct. This conviction involved an adult with a diagnosed mental incapacity who initially refused an intimate relationship with Michael, but ultimately agreed after he repeatedly pressured them. A devoted father. Michael has a tattoo of his daughter Cordelia on his arm that reads, "Daddy's Girl," a testament to his deep love for her. Cordelia's home life in Center, however, is fraught with tension. Her father, Michael, is controlling and once hired a private investigator to spy on her ex-boyfriend, creating a suffocating atmosphere. Cordelia's mother is battling Huntington's disease. Adding to the family's difficulties, Cordelia's transgender sister faces his own challenges. And while Cordelia is supportive, the pressure of her father's control leaves her feeling stifled and yearning for freedom. In February 2022, Cordelia meets Bryce, a dog-loving, adventurous companion, born in 1999 in Brainerd. Bryce, 23, dreams of building a yurt in Alaska and starting a self-sufficient farm. He yearns for a life of freedom, connected to nature. Cordelia and Bryce's encounter quickly blossoms into a friendship, bonded by their love of dogs and their desire to break free from constraints. Soon after Cordelia graduates from high school in June 2022, she and Bryce decide to take a cross-country road trip. The trip is not only an adventure but also a way for Cordelia to escape her parents' control and for Bryce to pursue his vision of an independent life in harmony with nature. This journey becomes a symbol of both of their desire for freedom and a way of life away from the modern world. Back to the investigation. When investigators circled to Michael about Bryce's phone, 10 minutes after his initial denial, he eventually admitted that he had taken it from the car and thrown it away in a trash bin at a gas station in Brainerd that same evening. He explained his actions by saying he was trying to protect his daughter. Michael confessed that he was terrified by the situation and worried that someone might track Bryce's phone and endanger Cordelia. Outside the storage complex, Michael spoke to the investigators, clearly distressed and feeling helpless. He said he'd been struggling to accept the situation his daughter was in. Michael openly shared his concerns about Bryce's behavior, admitting he felt deeply uneasy. He suspected Bryce was mistreating Cordelia, explaining that Bryce controlled nearly everything in Cordelia's life, making her feel humiliated and powerless. Michael said it was incredibly painful for him to witness this as her father. Michael told the investigators that he'd had thoughts of revenge, especially seeing how Bryce controlled Cordelia. However, he insisted he didn't want to do anything illegal and was trying his best to protect his family legally. During the investigation, Michael took 4 polygraph tests and said he passed all of them. He thought this proved he was innocent. However, the investigators told him that polygraph results are not allowed as evidence in Minnesota courts. Passing the tests didn't guarantee he was innocent, but it might make him seem more believable. Michael strongly emphasized these test results to try and convince the investigators he was telling the truth. During counseling, Michael frequently spoke about his wish to safeguard his family, including Cordelia and his younger daughter. He felt deeply responsible for their well-being and was committed to protecting them. Michael worried about going to jail because he wouldn't be able to provide for his daughters. He understood he needed to be cautious to prevent causing his family more pain. Michael saw bruises on Cordelia's face and confronted Bryce about it multiple times. He warned Bryce that further harm would lead to more than just verbal warnings. Although Michael was angry during these conversations, he told investigators he believed violence against Bryce wouldn't help. He felt Cordelia needed to realize the relationship was unhealthy and choose to leave. During his interviews with police, Michael frequently expressed mistrust of Bryce and often spoke about him in the past tense. He described Bryce as arrogant and prone to boasting about his supposed achievements. Michael believed that people like Bryce often struggled to handle real-life challenges and dismissed him as a fool who didn't understand the consequences of his actions. Investigators kept examining every part of the case, trying to sort through the conflicting information and find out what really happened. Interrogations were stressful, and each new piece of information made the already confusing story even harder to understand. Detectives worked to make sense of the scattered and conflicting details of the story. Michael's previous crime seemed very different from what was suspected in Bryce's disappearance. On the 29th of October, police searched Michael's storage unit with a warrant. Inside, they found a bleach bottle on the floor. Testing showed the bottle had both Bryce's and Michael's DNA on it. Investigators also found traces of blood and drag marks, suggesting a heavy object was dragged using a sled. They found the sled, covered with a blanket, in a ditch near the storage unit. The sled had what looked like dried blood on it. Investigators also found crucial evidence in Michael's phone records. These records showed that on the 27th of October, the day after Bryce disappeared, Michael left his house at 4:45 a.m. He drove to his storage unit and stayed there for 22 minutes. Afterward, he went to public land near Edward Lake, remaining there for an hour. This activity led investigators to suspect a crime had occurred at the storage unit. On the 30th of October, police used location data from Michael's phone to find a secluded, wooded area near Edward Lake. The area was deep in the wilderness and not easily found by chance. The ground showed signs of recent digging. There were broken branches stuck in the soil and freshly scattered leaves that were different from the surrounding leaves. Someone had clearly tried to hide the area, but they did a poor job. An excavation team dug into the ground and discovered Bryce Brogel's body. He had been shot in the back of the head. After Bryce's body was found, Michael immediately became the main suspect, which the investigators expected. They also learned that on the 26th of October, Michael borrowed a gun from his half-sister, Jen, claiming he needed it for a rodent problem at work. Soon after Bryce and Cordelia returned to Minnesota, Michael took Bryce to a storage unit. Michael said he planned to start an argument there to get Bryce into trouble with the authorities, hoping this would keep Bryce away from Cordelia. Michael stated he had the gun with him that day because he had been dealing with pests earlier. During a fight, Michael accused Bryce of hurting Cordelia. According to Michael, Bryce responded by saying Cordelia belonged to him and threatening to hurt her if anyone interfered. Michael claimed he shot Bryce in a fit of anger. Believing he was protecting his daughter, the investigation suggested the crime was planned in advance. Michael and Cordelia's landlord in Washington state said Michael had called him to ask if Bryce had ever hurt Cordelia. The landlord said he had seen bruises on Cordelia. Michael allegedly responded that he planned to kill Bryce and had already dug a grave. Michael's half-brother confirmed that he had heard similar threats. In July 2022, 1 month into the road trip with Bryce, Cordelia asked Michael to pick her up, but she wouldn't say where she was. Later, she told him she was fine and stopped complaining. Despite this, Michael was still very worried about Cordelia, especially when he saw bruises on her that she either denied or said were from accidents. Family members believed Michael thought Bryce was hurting Cordelia. The fatal shot at the storage unit, the use of a sled to transport Bryce's body to the woods, and the haphazard attempt to conceal the burial all pointed to a plan that Michael had thought through but executed poorly. He had cleaned the storage unit, buried Bryce's body, and tried to hide the evidence, but it wasn't enough to evade capture. In November 2022, Michael Lee Laflex was arrested and charged with second-degree murder for killing Bryce Brogel. Second-degree murder is defined as an intentional killing without prior planning. On March 30, 2023, the charges against Michael were upgraded to first-degree murder, and a grand jury formally accused him of this crime. His trial began in 2024. Throughout the legal process, Cordelia insisted that her relationship with Bryce was not abusive and that she was happy with him. Her social media activity seemed to confirm this. After her father, Michael Lee, was arrested, she posted on the 31st of October that she had lost a guardian angel. She continued to share positive memories of Bryce online, never supporting Michael's account of what happened. During the trial, Michael confessed to killing Bryce, but argued that the murder was not planned. He stated he acted on impulse to protect his daughter. The jury, however, did not believe him. In April 2024, Michael was found guilty of first-degree murder and second-degree murder. He received a life sentence without parole. The story of Michael and Bryce is a tragic example of how deep-seated suspicion and a lack of trust can lead to irreversible consequences. Michael, as a father, was unable to control his emotions and fears, which drove him to commit a horrific crime. His actions, fueled by fear and anger, resulted in the death of a young man and the destruction of his own daughter's life. The jury rejected his defense, and Michael received a life sentence. This case serves as a stark reminder of the importance of resolving conflicts peacefully and fostering trust with loved ones, rather than resorting to destructive actions born from anger or suspicion. Josie seemed happy and hopeful with her husband, Mithu. However, a dark and sinister secret may have been lurking beneath the surface. On a hot summer night in 2000, in Punjab, India, Josie was brutally murdered. Her body was found dumped in an irrigation canal. Her throat had been slit, she dying in agony for daring to love a man unworthy of her family's honor. Will Josie find justice after more than 2 decades? Or will her family's dark secrets continue to obscure the truth? In 1994, Ludhiana, Punjab, India, was a peaceful town with narrow streets and the lively sounds of rickshaws. Sukhwinder Singh Sidhu, nicknamed Mithu, was a well-known and respected rickshaw driver, especially among the town's youth. He was more than just a driver. He was a local hero, known for his energy, athleticism, and kabaddi skills. Kabaddi is a traditional team sport needing agility, strength, teamwork. Mithu captained his team. His name was famous throughout the region. He always worked hard and was dedicated to his sport. However, that autumn, something happened that disrupted his normal life. Yaswinda Kaur Zidhu, known as Josie, came to Jagraon, near Ludhiana, in November 1994 to visit family. She was a quiet and gentle young woman used to a peaceful life. While there, She kept hearing about a talented local athlete and rickshaw driver named Mithu. People often mentioned him, and she became curious about who he was. Although she hadn't intended to meet him, Destiny had other ideas. Jassy and her mother were at the rickshaw stop one ordinary morning, waiting for a ride to the market. Little did Jassy know, she was about to meet someone she'd often heard about. A rickshaw arrived, and Jassy saw the driver, a young man with a striking look. Mithu. He immediately noticed Jassy and seemed captivated. Jassy, her mother, and other passengers then settled into the rickshaw. As the rickshaw traveled through the town's narrow streets, Mithu repeatedly glanced back at Jassy. Mithu, usually absorbed in his work, found himself increasingly distracted by the mysterious girl behind him. Jassy noticed his glances and, though self-conscious, felt intrigued. She tried to avoid his gaze, but their eyes met briefly, and they exchanged a small smile. Jassy and her mother got out of the rickshaw. As she turned, she saw Mithu looking at her. Their eyes met for a longer moment than before. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a silent communication. This chance meeting felt significant in a way they hadn't expected. Throughout the day, Jassy kept thinking about the rickshaw driver and his warm, curious gaze. Mithu, too, was preoccupied by their brief interaction and the meaningful look they had shared. These quick glances were enough to stay with them both throughout the day. Night fell. As Mithu returned home after a long day of work, exhaustion settled in, and he decided to rest for a while in his room. However, the peace was shattered by sudden cries from outside. He rushed out to see two girls stranded by the side of the road. One of them was Jassy, the very same girl he had driven earlier that day. They were in trouble. Their scooter had broken down, and they couldn't fix it themselves. Mithu approached them without hesitation, offering his help right away. He began examining the scooter carefully, trying to figure out what was wrong. After several attempts to start the engine, he finally identified the problem and managed to fix it. Jassy was grateful, but they had trouble communicating because Jassy spoke only English and Mithu spoke only Punjab. Luckily, Jassy's friend could translate, so they could say a few things to each other. Mithu later found out that Jassy was staying with relatives who lived only 15 minutes from him. He was 22, and Jassy was 19. They were both young and energetic, and it was clear they were interested in each other. The following evening, Mithu felt compelled to see Jassy again. Her family was strict and wouldn't allow her to have male visitors. Jassy had to secretly meet him at the window. They held hands and talked, though the language difference made it difficult to understand each other. Despite this, they shared a strong connection that went beyond words. Jassy's life was very restricted. She was born in India and moved to Canada with her parents. They lived in a large house with many relatives. Her parents and other family members closely watched her. Enforced strict rules, Jassy grew up valuing tradition, respecting elders, and obeying family rules. Even in Canada, she remained connected to her Indian heritage. She wasn't interested in Western culture, avoided parties, and preferred spending quiet evenings with her family. And her education was very important to her. In India, Jassy stayed with her grandparents, who were wealthy landowners and influential figures in the region. Their large, luxurious home and high social status demonstrated the family's prominent position in the community. The family also owned a business in Canada, further enhancing their influence. Jassy's uncle, Surjit Singh Badesha, made all family decisions because her father had schizophrenia and could not participate. Surjit was a strict, and the family respected his authority. Mithu, coming from a humble farming family, experienced a difficult childhood. After high school, he quickly began working to help his family. Known for his hard work and honesty, Mithu gained the respect of his community. Despite the low income from driving a rickshaw, he valued his independence and dedicated himself to supporting his family. Mithu felt uneasy upon learning that Jassy came from a rich and powerful family. He was aware of their different social classes. Despite this difference, they started dating in secret. They kept their relationship hidden from Jassy's family. who would disapprove of her being with a poor rickshaw driver. However, Jassi didn't care about Mithu's wealth. She loved him for his kindness and honesty. As Jassi's departure date for Canada neared, she became increasingly sad about leaving Mithu. A few days before her flight, she tore up her passport and told her mother she'd lost it. This was a lie to buy her an extra 20 days in India while she applied for a new passport. Her family was angry, but they had to accept the situation. Jassi and Mithu spent every possible moment together during those 20 days, making the most of their remaining time. In January 1995, Jassi returned to Canada, but she and Mithu continued their relationship through letters and phone calls. Jassi wrote in English, and Mithu responded in Punjabi. Friends helped them translate their letters. Jassi also began learning Punjabi to better communicate with Mithu. International calls were expensive, so their phone conversations were short but meaningful. They stayed in touch for 4 years, hoping to be together again. In 1999, Jassi's family arranged her marriage in India. Her uncle, Surjit, had found a suitable husband, a wealthy, 60-year-old landowner. Jassi was shocked, as he was much older than her, and she couldn't bear the thought of marrying him. Jassi confided in a trusted aunt that she felt she would die if she couldn't marry Mithu. Understanding the seriousness of the situation, her aunt offered to help. On March 1999, Jassi and Mithu secretly married in a quiet ceremony at a gurdwara, without anyone's knowledge. Afterward, Jassi returned home, and the marriage remained a secret. Her arranged marriage to the older man was first delayed and then cancelled altogether. Jassi stayed in India for 2 more months, secretly meeting Mithu, knowing that their relationship's exposure could have severe consequences. When she had to go back to Canada, she assured Mithu she would visit again soon. They kept in contact, and he even got a phone installed at home to make talking easier. But in early 2000, Jassi's relatives in India discovered her secret marriage and told her parents. Her mother and uncle were very angry. Jassi was locked in her room, not allowed to use the phone, and had no way to reach Mithu. A few days later, Jassi's mother, Malkat Kaur Sidhu, changed tactics. She told Jassi that the family now accepted her relationship with Mithu. She promised to help plan a lavish wedding in India and assist Mithu in moving to Canada. Jassi was overjoyed and believed her mother. Then, a few days later, her mother asked her to sign a stack of documents, claiming they were needed for Mithu's visa. Jassi quickly signed everything, even several blank pages, without carefully reading them. Jassi was unaware that her relatives would later use the blank sheets of paper to create a false statement. The statement said that Jassi was kidnapped by Mithu and forced into marriage. This false statement was submitted to the police in Punjab, leading to Mithu's arrest. He was charged with kidnapping, forced marriage, and illegal possession of a weapon. He was imprisoned for several months while awaiting trial, and his family suffered greatly due to these false accusations. Back in Canada, Jassi kept writing to her husband, Mithu, but he never replied. She also couldn't reach him by phone. Jassi soon understood that something was seriously wrong. She eventually discovered through friends that Mithu had been arrested. Jassi immediately suspected her relatives, recalling how her mother and uncle had deceived her into signing documents. She realized it was all a planned scheme. The situation was even worse than she thought. The false charges didn't just affect Mithu. 2 of his relatives and 2 friends were also arrested as accomplices. These people had no connection to the marriage but were detained to put pressure on Mithu and his family. Jassi refused to give up. She managed to get through to Mithu by phone, but the conversation was strained. Mithu was angry and deeply hurt. He blamed Jassi for signing the documents that had led to his arrest. Jassi tried to explain that she had been deceived, that her trust had been exploited by her mother and uncle, and that she herself was now effectively under house arrest, forbidden from contacting anyone. Jassi eventually escaped her family's control with the help of her father, who had schizophrenia, and her brother. With their support and the assistance of Canadian authorities, she left her family and returned to India. Once in Punjab, Jassi went to the local police and asked them to release Mithu and the others. She gave a statement saying they were innocent and that she had married Mithu willingly. After a long investigation, the police released Mithu and his family. Jassi chose to stay in India, assuring Mithu she wouldn't go back to Canada. Because they feared her family, they went into hiding. In June 2000, Mithu took Jassi to his uncle's house, believing she'd be safer there. On June 7th, they received a call from Canada. Mithu's uncle answered, and it was Jassi's mother, Malkiat. She asked to speak to Jassi. Cautiously, Jassi took the phone. Her mother gently says that she wants her to be happy and approves of her relationship with Mithu. Mithu suspected something wasn't right. Soon after the first call, the phone rang again. Malkiat asked to speak to Mithu, but this time her voice was angry and threats. Then Jassi's uncle, Surjit, got on the phone and threatened him too. Mithu hung up without saying anything, not wanting Jassi to worry, but he felt a growing sense of fear. He knew they would be in trouble. Jassi suggested going to the market to buy a dress for an upcoming celebration on the 12th of June. Mithu was hesitant, worried about their safety, and initially refused. However, seeing how excited she was, he agreed, thinking it would be a quick and uneventful outing. On June 5th, they headed to the market. Jassi picked out a dress, and Mithu paid for it. They then stopped at a cafe for coffee before starting their journey home. On their way back, trouble struck. Their scooter kept breaking down, forcing them to stop and seek help from a mechanic multiple times. It was already dark by the time they managed to get back on the road. Despite the delays, they tried to enjoy the moments they had together. Late that night, Mithu's parents received devastating news. Their son had been admitted to the hospital in critical condition. There was no word about Jassi's whereabouts. At the hospital, Mithu was unconscious. He woke up hours later. After doctors treated him, he spoke to the police. Mithu explained that on the way home, he saw two men on a scooter following them. He didn't tell Jassi because he didn't want to scare her. The men on the scooter eventually seemed to leave, and Mithu thought they were safe. However, as they got close to home, a car blocked their way. 6 men got out of the car and approached them. Mithu stopped the scooter, unsure of what was going on. The men then attacked them with wooden sticks. Mithu tried to defend himself and Jassi, but there were too many attackers. One of them hit Mithu in the head, and he passed out. The attackers, thinking he was dead, threw him into a ditch by the road. He didn't know what had happened to Jassi. Later, some workers found Mithu unconscious near the ditch. They immediately called for medical assistance, and he was quickly taken to the hospital. At the same time, the Punjab police began searching for Jassi. On June 9th, the following day, Jassi's body was found close to where Mithu had been attacked. She had several severe wounds, including a deadly one to her neck. The police reached out to her relatives in Canada and sent them photos to identify her. However, neither Malkiat nor Surjit confirmed the identification. Later, Mithu, along with his parents and friends, positively identified her. Jassi's Canadian relatives did not attend the funeral or claim her body. This behavior made the police suspicious, and they started an investigation. During the search for suspects, officers detained Joginder Singh, a police inspector. During interrogation, Joginder revealed that the mastermind behind the attack was Surjit Singh Badesha, Jassi's uncle, who lived in Punjab. Joginder explained that after attacking Mithu, they assumed he was dead and left him in a ditch. They then forced Jassi into a car. She was unconscious, and they took her to a remote farmhouse. When Jassi regained consciousness, she demanded answers and asked about Mithu. She was told he was dead, which enraged her. Joginder then called Malkiat and handed the phone to Jassi. Her mother ordered her to return to Canada, but Jassi, furious and defiant, declared that she would tell everyone the truth. At that point, Surjit grabbed the phone and tried to calm the situation while Jassi was being held under the control. They discussed their next steps. The perpetrators pressured Jassi to make a false statement against Mithu and return to Canada. But she refused, which only escalated their aggression. Joginder called Malkiat again, informing her that Jassi would not comply. Malkiat then reportedly gave her consent for them to take care of her. Surjit agreed to increase the payment, offering an additional 3 lakh rupees, approximately $4,000. Following Yoginder's confession, the police arrested 11 more people, including Darshan Singh Sidhu, Surjit Singh Badesha, and Malkiat Kaur Sidhu. Malkiat and Surjit became primary suspects. The case sparked legal proceedings in both India and Canada. The investigation revealed that Malkiat and Surjit had orchestrated the crime, directing Darshan and Joginder to handle Mithu, Darshan Singh Sidhu, one of the men previously convicted of Jassi's murder, but later acquitted in India on appeal, was granted permanent residency in Canada in 2008 after lying about his criminal status on his immigration application. He was later declared inadmissible to Canada after his criminal past was revealed. On May 9, 2014, after a hearing in the Supreme Court of British Columbia, Justice Gregory Finch ordered Surjit Badesha and Malkiat Sidhu to be handed over to Indian police for trial. This officially ended the debate over their extradition, which had stalled due to both sides arguing that there was insufficient evidence to warrant extradition. Finch justified his decision by presenting evidence that India had presented against Surjit, including 266 phone calls between Surjit and 4 men convicted of Jassi's murder. Justice Finch also reminded those present that the role of the Canadian court is to determine whether a jury can convict based on the evidence, not whether they should convict. On January 24, 2019, both were extradited and arrived in Delhi, India, to face charges. Since returning to India, Malkiat and Surjit have avoided all interaction with the media, refusing to give statements or discuss the case. Mithu, having lost the love of his life, has devoted himself to seeking justice. He has never remarried. She was once a shining example of positivity, a young woman whose vibrant energy uplifted everyone around her. However, one summer night in Las Vegas, her bright spirit was tragically extinguished in an unimaginable way. What began as a quest for meaning and spiritual growth took a dark turn, leading her into a world filled with rituals, substances, and a man who claimed he could purify her soul. In the hours that followed, her search for peace transformed into a horrifying nightmare. How did a woman celebrated for her kindness and inspiration find herself ensnared in a deadly ritual of spiritual cleansing? And who was the man whose appealing persona masked a far more sinister nature? Join us as we reveal the story of Herline, a journey of light overtaken by darkness and trust that led to tragedy. Herline was born in 1991 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She grew up in a nurturing environment, surrounded by the love of her parents and sisters, outgoing and personable. She easily connected with others and was known for her supportive nature and positivity. From an early age, Herline was curious and eager to learn, especially about science and health. She enrolled in college to study biological sciences with hopes of a career in medicine or research. However, after graduating, she realized that working in a lab or an office was not her calling. Yearning for change, she made a bold move to Las Vegas, a city known for its many opportunities and bustling lifestyle. Las Vegas represented a fresh start for Herline. Shortly after her arrival, she developed a passion for fitness. Within months, her physical transformation was remarkable. She grew stronger, and her confidence soared. This enthusiasm led her to become a certified personal trainer, motivated to help others achieve their goals. Her career flourished as clients valued her encouragement and authentic commitment. She didn't just create workout plans. She inspired people, helping them overcome insecurities and becoming a trusted companion in their fitness journeys. Her colleagues admired her positive energy and ability to connect with those around her. Yet, despite her success, She was struggling internally. After moving to Las Vegas, Herlene often contemplated the deeper meaning of life. This quest for understanding drew her towards spiritual practices. She explored alternative healing, meditation, and various philosophical views. The more she learned, the more captivated she became by concepts of inner balance, energy work, and unconventional perspectives on existence. This new interest introduced her to a different social group. Among them was someone equally enthusiastic about self-discovery. Their conversations focused on spiritual growth and the search for meaning. Initially, this was inspiring, but eventually, things began to shift. Ash Armand had a captivating presence. Charismatic, confident, and articulate, he possessed an uncanny ability to engage others and make them feel understood, garnering attention. He exuded the impression of someone with profound life experiences and insights. He shared his ideas on energy, consciousness, and existence with those who sought answers. Herlene found his philosophy intriguing. She believed that being in his company would enhance her exploration of deeper truths. Their discussions led to a closer bond, as they collaborated on methods to cleanse their minds, transcend personal barriers, and challenge societal norms. Eventually, Ash started introducing more radical concepts, claiming that traditional self-improvement techniques were limited. He argued that true enlightenment required stepping outside familiar boundaries, overcoming fear, and broadening one's perspective. He believed that genuine awareness could only be achieved by breaking mental restraints and venturing beyond conventional existence. This marked the beginning of their excursions. They traveled to remote areas, seeking solitude where they could disconnect from the outside world. In these quiet spaces, Herlene began experimenting with new self-discovery techniques. Over time, these practices evolved. Restricted substances became a central part of the experience, and Herlene was told they were crucial for reaching higher awareness and escaping the limitations of reality. Under their influence, she experienced altered states of consciousness, where sensations felt like steps toward a deeper truth. Initially, each session seemed like a journey to greater understanding, but eventually, the boundaries blurred. Her perception became unstable, and distinguishing between reality and illusion became increasingly difficult. While these experiences were intoxicating, they also distanced her from the world she once knew. At some point, this pursuit of harmony transformed into something different. Herlene may not have realized how deeply involved she had become. But little by little, her life was heading in an irreversible direction. Herlene and Ash quickly bonded, their relationship progressing rapidly. However, subtle warning signs began to appear over time. At first, they seemed minor, slight changes in his behavior that she overlooked. While Ash was often caring and affectionate, there were moments when he became distant and withdrawn, with unpredictable mood swings. Occasionally, he spoke with profound inspiration, as if sharing the universe's secrets with her. Other times, he grew irritable over trivial matters and would fall silent for long stretches. Sometimes, Ash would disappear completely, ignoring Herlene's messages and calls, only to return as if nothing had happened. He explained that he needed time to clear his mind and balance his internal energy. He claimed to sense other people's emotions, sometimes needing to isolate himself to escape their influence. Herlene tried to be understanding, but these absences left her feeling uneasy. Ash increasingly insisted that she needed to change her perspective, letting go of traditional beliefs. He argued that logic restricted people from unlocking their true potential, and urged her to trust her intuition and inner voice. As time passed, Ash's discussions became stranger. He spoke of higher beings and individuals connected to dark energy that hindered personal evolution. One unsettling claim was that something within Herlene needed purification. Ash insisted he could sense an imbalance in her energy field, which he claimed hindered her full awareness and true harmony. Ash's behavior became more erratic. Some days, he would say he could see her future or read her thoughts. Other days, he would express agitation, insisting she trust only him. These mood swings intensified. One day, he acted as an inspiring mentor. The next, he was withdrawn, irritable, and suspicious. He introduced the idea of rituals, claiming that ancient methods could remove internal barriers and lead to enlightenment. He asserted these special ceremonies were essential for truly comprehending life. Initially, Herlene viewed this merely as another philosophical idea, but gradually Ash encouraged her to participate in these practices. He told her it was necessary and that she needed to stop fearing the unknown. He insisted that complete trust in him was required for her to achieve true harmony. Initially unaware of the danger, she perceived his beliefs as merely personal quirks. However, it became clear over time that his views were influencing his behavior and impacting their relationship. He increasingly demanded that she trust him entirely, listen only to him, and never question his methods. On the evening of July 15, 2020, Herlene and Ash were in his apartment in Las Vegas. They had planned to spend the evening on a spiritual cleansing session. Conversations about reaching higher states of consciousness had been ongoing, and now, according to Ash, the time had come to eliminate all inner barriers. As part of their preparation, Ash insisted on using restricted substances, believing that only under their influence could one achieve clarity and connect with true reality. Although Herlene was hesitant at first, she eventually agreed. It wasn't her first experience with these substances, but this time felt different. The dosage was higher than usual. Within minutes, Herlene began to have intense hallucinations. The space around her warped, familiar objects distorted, and sounds came in unsettling waves. Her grip on reality was slipping. As these effects increased, Ash became more agitated. He spoke quickly, claiming he could see beyond the physical world and was uncovering deeper truths. Meanwhile, Herlene was struggling. Her visions did not bring her peace, but instead increased her anxiety. She wanted to focus, but her body felt unresponsive. Ash's behavior became increasingly erratic. He approached Herlene and insisted he sensed something unnatural within her. His voice turned sharp, and his gaze was intense. He claimed dark energy surrounded her and insisted she needed to be cleansed. When Herlene tried to argue, the tension escalated further. Ash accused her of resisting the process and claimed she was blocking the release of negative energy. Frustration filled his voice as he repeated that he felt something dark inside her that needed to be expelled. His unsettling words only made the situation worse. Despite Herlene's attempts to calm him, he could not process her responses. Consumed as he was by the substances, he became fixated on the idea that immediate action was needed. Suddenly, Ash grabbed Herlene's wrists. With a forceful shove, he pushed her hard to the floor, but the aggression didn't stop there. He picked up a heavy glass candle holder and struck her several times. Her head slumped, and her body convulsed. But Ash continued his assault. He used a knife and other objects, inflicting deep wounds. The violence only ceased when Herlene stopped breathing, and a chilling silence enveloped the apartment. As the effects of the substances began to fade, Ash slowly realized the magnitude of what he had done. Blood stained the floor, his clothes, and his hands. For hours, he struggled to comprehend his actions, repeatedly approaching Herlene's lifeless body, as if hoping there was a way to undo the horror. But nothing remained to fix. On the morning of the 16th of July, 2020, emergency services received a call. The caller, Ash Armand, sounded tense, but not fully panicked. He informed the dispatcher that his partner was dead, claiming it was an accident and that he had tried to help her, though it was too late. Officers arrived a few minutes later, and Ash met them at the door. His body was covered in dried blood, and while he looked exhausted, he did not display the usual signs of shock or distress typically seen in someone who has just experienced a tragedy. Once inside, the officers found a chaotic scene. Herlene's body lay motionless in the center of the room. Her skin had gone pale, and there were dark bruises on her face and neck. Her hands showed scratches and were stained with dried blood, suggesting a violent struggle had occurred. In contrast, the bathroom was suspiciously clean. with only faint streaks of blood visible on the tiles. While most surfaces appeared to have been scrubbed, officers discovered clothes stained with blood in the washing machine. Additionally, Ash's clothing seemed freshly laundered, which raised suspicions. Near the bed, 2 unlit candles were found, and investigators noted traces of melted wax on Herlene's body. On the nightstand, investigators discovered 2 knives, a kitchen knife and a folding utility blade, both with dried blood on them. This suggested someone had attempted to hide what had happened. A suitcase near the entrance revealed personal items, cash, and documents, indicating Ash might have been getting ready to leave the scene but either changed his mind or ran out of time. During questioning, Ash's statements were inconsistent. He claimed to have no memory of the events, but then said Herlene attacked him first, and he acted in self-defense. However, he had no visible injuries or signs of a struggle to support his claims. Ash's demeanor during the investigation was notable. He showed no emotions, didn't ask for help, and appeared unaffected by the situation. Forensic experts examined the scene further and found bottles of alcohol in the refrigerator. They also discovered a powdery substance on the table, which was confirmed to be an illegal banned substance. It became evident that someone had attempted to cover up evidence, but their efforts were careless. The evidence suggested that the crime may have occurred while someone was under the influence of a banned substance. As investigators gathered more information, Ash was placed in the back of a patrol car. He didn't resist or argue, and only remarked that he didn't want it to end that way. Although the investigation was just beginning, authorities had strong doubts about his self-defense claim. After Ash's arrest, detectives turned their attention to his background. They aimed to uncover what led him to this moment rather than debating his guilt. They quickly learned significant details about his past. Ash's real name was Akshaya Kubiak. Born in 1981 in India, he spent his formative years in Japan and the United States. His parents exposed him to spiritual practices, alternative medicine, and meditation early on. As a teenager, he became interested in Eastern philosophy, esoteric teachings, and pursued massage therapy and energy healing. A major turning point in Ash's life occurred in 2011. Garen James, owner of a high-end escort agency, noticed Ash's striking looks and recruited him, leading him to Las Vegas. There, he immersed himself in a lifestyle filled with wealthy clients and fast money. In 2012, he gained fame by appearing on the reality show Gigolos, which brought him financial success. However, this fame came with its own pressures. The need to remain in the spotlight, coupled with rivalry in the industry, led Ash to seek ways to uphold his image as a desirable man. He began using steroids to improve his physique, eventually progressing to stronger substances, resulting in a dependence on both the drugs and external validation. His aggressive behavior escalated, leading to several altercations in Las Vegas clubs and a driving under the influence arrest. After Gigolos ended in 2016, Ash's popularity waned. His income shrank as attempts to stay relevant in the entertainment industry failed. By 2020, after spending his earnings on a lavish lifestyle of cars and parties, he found himself in a tough situation. No longer a beloved public figure, he was living in a rented apartment, making money through occasional meetings with fans who paid for his company. By the time he met Herlene, his life was already in turmoil. Searching for meaning, he became drawn to spiritual practices and mysticism, convinced he could reshape reality. However, influenced by banned substances, these beliefs morphed into an obsession. Ash's relationship with Herlene became a way for him to regain power. He viewed her not just as a partner, but someone he could control. Over time, his confidence developed into a belief that he held sway over her thoughts and destiny. On the night of the incident, Ash's mind, damaged by years of substance abuse and delusion, finally broke. Investigators gradually pieced together his story, revealing that this crime was not a random act. It was the result of a long, troubling path he had been on for years. The trial started in 2021, with prosecutors charging Ash with first-degree intentional harm. They argued that Herlene had suffered a brutal attack and that Ash's self-defense claim was inconsistent with the evidence. The defense contended that Ash was temporarily mentally unstable, asserting that substance use and emotional distress had caused him to lose control. Ash maintained that he loved Herline and would never intentionally hurt her. Public opinion was split. Some condemned the brutality of the crime and called for the maximum sentence, while others, including fans of the show Gigolos, supported Ash, viewing him as a victim of circumstances. Many of these supporters shared messages online and formed groups to raise funds for his legal defense. In contrast, Herline's family tirelessly sought justice. Her parents and sisters spoke in interviews, describing her as kind and vibrant, and emphasized that nothing could lessen Ash's responsibility for his actions. In December 2021, the court found Ash Armand guilty and sentenced him to 20 years in prison. He could apply for parole after serving 8 years. Herline's family was disappointed by the ruling, believing the punishment was too lenient given the crime's severity. However, the court considered the defense's arguments about Ash's mental state at the time of the incident, which influenced the outcome. Under the sentence, Ash will remain in prison until 2041, with the possibility of early release in 2029, though it is uncertain whether he will receive parole. There are still unresolved questions about the case. What was happening in Ash's mind that night? Was it solely due to substances? Or did he have intent? Why did he try to hide what happened before calling the police? Does he truly understand the extent of his guilt? Although the investigation is complete and the sentence has been passed, discussions about the case continue. Even years later, it remains a controversial topic, with opinions divided between those who view him as a criminal and those who see him as struggling with his own demons. On a cold January afternoon in Georgia, the quiet of a small family home is shattered by a horrifying discovery. In the woods behind them, Alana Callahan lies motionless, covered in blood, her life brutally taken. But what haunts everyone is more than the violence of the scene. It's the presence of a familiar face, Aaron Schmidt, Alana's best friend, who claims to have witnessed the entire incident. He points to the body, insisting that he's just warded off a mysterious attacker dressed in black. But as investigators piece together the puzzle, Aaron's story and the crime scene begin to diverge in terrifying ways. Who really killed Alana Callahan? And why is a trusted friend at the center of the darkest suspicion? In 2011, Alana Callahan was a 14-year-old student living in Harlem, Georgia. Her family had moved there shortly before a tragic incident. Her father served in the military, and she was one of 4 siblings who were known to be friendly and tightly bonded. After relocating, Alana quickly made friends with local teenagers, and they all began attending church, gaining support from the community. Alana was viewed as a positive, well-adjusted girl who was focused on her studies and aspired to become a lawyer. Sadly, her dreams would not come to fruition. On January 31, 2011, the weather was cold. Alana attended school as usual, and her older sister, Amanda, planned to meet her at the bus stop later. Alana arrived home at 3:32 p.m. and immediately went online. At 3:45 p.m., Amanda left to pick up their younger brother, Chase, who missed the first bus. When Amanda returned home shortly after, she noticed something unusual. Next to Alana's shoes in the entryway were a pair of men's boots belonging to Aaron Schmidt, a family friend. The backsliding door was wide open, which was strange given the chilly January weather. Inside, Alana's computer chair was knocked over, and Amanda spotted red drops on the floor that she initially thought were soda. However, Alana was nowhere to be found. When Amanda called for Alana and received no reply, she felt a sense of unease. Seeing bright red stains on the wall near the computer heightened her concern, and she began to feel panicked. Chase also walked in and was immediately alarmed by the strange situation. While Amanda was trying to understand what was happening, Alana's best friend, 14 years old, Aaron Schmidt, rushed into the house. He was well known to the family. He came in from the backyard, shouting that he had seen a man in black attack Alana inside the house and then drag her into the woods through the back door. He claimed he scared the attacker away, but said Alana was hurt and needed urgent help. Amanda and her younger brother Chase quickly went to the forest, following Aaron's calls. Aaron pointed out a body on the ground, but at first, no one else could see it. As they walked a short distance, they found Alana lying on the ground, covered in blood. Chase and Amanda immediately tried to help her, but she showed no signs of life. Amanda called 911 for assistance, and the operator provided instructions for cardiopulmonary resuscitation, but nothing worked. Alana remained unresponsive. Law enforcement officers arrived on the scene within minutes of the incident and attempted to help Alana, who had been shot in the head. Paramedics arrived shortly thereafter, but only confirmed that she had died. The sheriff acted quickly, sending police officers to search for the unknown attacker Aaron described, along with 2 dog teams. Detectives also began interviewing the first witnesses at the crime scene, particularly Aaron, who claimed to have seen the attacker and was acting oddly. When the police arrived, they found Amanda with blood on her hands from attempting to aid Alana, while Aaron had bloodstains only on the collar of his shirt and on his shorts. Despite claiming he got his clothes dirty helping Alana, his hands were clean, raising doubts among the detectives. Amanda was the first to be questioned. She recounted everything she had seen before finding Alana dead. Noting that Aaron was the last person to see Alana alive and the only one who had witnessed the attacker, Amanda mentioned that Aaron was not only Alana's best friend, but also a close family friend. He visited their home almost daily after school, and they often shared meals together. Amanda noted that Aaron had come from the woods where he found Alana, but she didn't hear any gunshots, which was strange. Aaron stated he tried to help Alana before calling Amanda and ended up throwing up. Initially, Amanda didn't suspect him of wrongdoing, as she had no reason to believe he would attack her sister. However, she pointed out inconsistencies in his account, which made her a key witness for the detectives. Amanda and Chase realized that Aaron shouldn't have been able to see Alana's body from where he claimed to see it. The area was blocked by thick bushes, which had already been checked by them. The detectives confirmed this information. Furthermore, while Amanda was on the phone with 911, Aaron touched Alana's body and made a peculiar comment, suggesting he was worried the police would think he was responsible for her death. This behavior raised suspicions. The medical examiner later reported that Alana had been shot in the head with a fatal wound that damaged vital arteries. The bullet was found in the living room of the house where the attack occurred, indicating that the killer had dragged Alana outside right after the shooting, resulting in minimal blood being left inside. During her discussions with law enforcement, Amanda did not appear suspicious. She was genuinely upset about her sister's death, crying as she shared her feelings. In contrast, Aaron seemed unusually calm and detached when discussing Alana's death, which raised further suspicion. Realizing how calm he was acting, he suddenly began to cry. But one of the detectives noticed he had no real tears and was merely rubbing his eyes, as if trying to fake his distress. Witnesses reported that Alana's family quickly became friends with Aaron after moving into their neighborhood in May 2010. Though he was known to have behavioral issues and a rebellious streak, no one perceived him as dangerous until a specific incident occurred. He was generally friendly and calm, which made it easy for Alana and her family to connect with him. They spoke often, and Aaron began visiting their home nearly every day. Amanda noticed Aaron acting strangely after Alana died. She thought it was unreasonable for him to worry about his fingerprints on Alana's body. A psychiatrist from the sheriff's office interviewed Aaron and reviewed the case details, concluding that his concern about fingerprints indicated guilt, leading the psychiatrist to believe he had a role in the crime. After questioning Amanda, detectives spoke with Aaron. Aaron, a 14-year-old high school student, lived with his older half-sister in Harlem, Georgia, right next to Alana's family. Aaron claimed that he returned home from school an hour early on the day of the murder and, despite the bad weather, went straight home instead of waiting at the bus stop for his friends. Knowing Alana would be home soon, he walked to her house. As he approached, he noticed a man in black jump inside, heard a loud bang, and saw a person dragging a girl into the nearby woods. Aaron chased after them, hoping to help Alana, but arrived too late. Afterward, he was so shaken that he vomited. When Amanda returned home, Aaron ran inside to explain what had happened and to call for assistance. However, Amanda and others questioned Aaron's account. Alana had no known enemies fitting his description, and the details of the alleged attacker were vague. Aaron described the person as a white male in his 30s, but couldn't provide any identifying features and thought he might be a burglar. Remarkably, several valuable electronics were missing from Alana's home, but there were no signs of forced entry. The family wasn't sure if the items were taken on the day of the murder. They believed they might have gone missing earlier. Aaron claimed he had seen the car used by the attacker. He said that when he ran toward Alana, the killer fled in a white pickup truck parked off a forest path. Even with suspicions growing, detectives didn't rush to conclusions due to Aaron's young age of 14. They initially attributed the inconsistencies in his story to the stress he was under. However, as the questioning continued, his narrative became increasingly muddled. Detectives grew more suspicious when they discovered that Aaron and Alana had briefly dated. Adults believed that he fell in love when Aaron first met her family, but their romantic involvement lasted only a few days. After a church service, where the pastor advised Alana that she was too young for a relationship, she told Aaron she wanted to end things due to the pastor's influence and her age. A few months later, Alana was dead, which raised concerns about Aaron's motives. Search teams with tracking dogs scoured the area around the crime scene, but found no evidence that matched Aaron's description. There were no tire tracks from the white pickup truck he mentioned. The dogs repeatedly returned to the body and then headed toward her home, suggesting that the only people present at the crime scene were Aaron, Amanda, and Alana. A forensic examination determined that Alana was shot with a .22 caliber pistol, the same type that was in her home. Alana's parents own a handgun and a pistol in the bedroom, but have forbidden other family members from entering the room or using any type of gun. The pistol was found in its usual location in the bedroom and sent for ballistics testing, which revealed that Alana had indeed been shot with a different gun. Further testing confirmed suspicions when gunpowder residue was found on Aaron's hands. He claimed that just days before the incident, he and Alana's family had set up an impromptu shooting range and had used Alana's parents' pistol. However, the family rejected this story, as they never permitted teenagers to engage in such dangerous activities. Nonetheless, Aaron's statement gave investigators useful information. It showed that he was aware of the firearms in Alana's house and suggested he might be trying to cover up his involvement with a lie. Additionally, the gunpowder residue was too fresh to have come from an event several days prior, indicating that Aaron would have had to wash his hands multiple times to remove it. When detectives confronted Aaron about their suspicions, he denied shooting Alana. Despite sticking to his story, it began to sound increasingly implausible. Now, he claimed that upon seeing a stranger get into a pickup truck, he ran toward it to see the license plate, but instead stumbled upon a gun a few meters from Alana's body. He said he took the gun and tossed it into the bushes in the forest. Interestingly, the gun was discovered exactly where Aaron indicated. His account included details not previously released to the public, leading detectives to suspect he was trying to adjust his lies to fit the facts that had emerged during the investigation. Further ballistics analysis confirmed that the bullet that killed Alana was fired from the gun found in the forest, which contained only Aaron's fingerprints and no other evidence. Suddenly, he remembered that the real killer must have worn gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints. As the interrogation progressed, it was evident that Aaron was becoming increasingly anxious, and police confidence grew that they would soon break him. After several hours, even Aaron realized he couldn't outsmart the detectives, no matter how much he altered his story to match new evidence. Eventually, he expressed a wish to confess. Aaron claimed that the shooting was an accident. He said that when Amanda left to pick up Chase, he went to visit Alana, knowing she was afraid of guns. He attempted to play a prank. He entered the house quietly through the unlocked door, removed his shoes, and approached without her noticing. He picked up the gun but did not realize it was loaded. Sneaking up behind her, he pointed the gun at the back of her head and accidentally pulled the trigger. When asked where he got the gun, he could not answer. Panicking, he planned to stage an attack by an unknown assailant and dragged Alana's body, which still showed signs of life, into the woods. By the time he left her on the ground, Amanda had returned home. Hearing Amanda's car, Aaron felt frightened, but he decided to continue with his charade. By the time of his confession, he had undergone over 4 hours of questioning and provided detectives with 27 different versions of events surrounding Alana's murder, none of which matched the evidence collected during the investigation. Consequently, Aaron Schmidt, who was 14 years old, was charged with the murder of 14-year-old Alana and faced additional charges. He was arrested and spent the next 2 years in a juvenile detention center. A background check revealed that Aaron had no criminal record and had never been involved in any illegal activities prior to this incident. He did not attend Harlem School. Instead, he was enrolled at Grovetown, a school for children and adolescents with behavioral issues. His friends and family had not observed any violent behavior in him. When detectives interviewed the principal of his school, he confirmed that Aaron struggled with learning, which is why he transferred to a different institution. However, he did not provide details about the specific difficulties Aaron faced. Investigators believe that Aaron, unable to handle rejection from Alana, a girl he had a crush on, attacked her after she refused to date him. They also considered the possibility of an attempted kidnapping, but Alana resisted, leading to her being shot during a struggle. Alana's family observed that Aaron's behavior became more and more suspicious after Alana rejected his advances. About a week before the murder, Aaron entered their home while the family was away. Alana discovered him inside when she returned from school, and she was both surprised and alarmed to find the front door unlocked. Alana's mother follows her home and suspects Aaron of breaking in. When she inquired about how he got inside, he claimed the door was simply unlocked. The family doubted his statement, as they always locked their door when leaving. Subsequently, Alana's mother had a serious conversation with Aaron, informing him that he could not visit unless one of her parents was home and that he was not allowed over before 5 p.m. Alana's parents also stressed that the entire family knew that their father kept a shotgun and a handgun in his bedroom. The others were not allowed to enter the room or touch the weapons. They also never talked about it with outsiders, not even Aaron. The fact that Aaron was aware of the firearms heightened the family's fears. This knowledge suggested that he had previously been in the house alone and had carefully examined the location of their belongings. During a search of Aaron's home, police discovered a gun case identical to the one containing the firearm found in the woods. Along with ammunition and an owner's manual, this evidence indicated that he had purchased the gun himself. Yet he insisted he acquired it only after the crime, out of fear that the unknown individual would come after him for being a witness. It was clear that a 14-year-old could not have purchased a firearm in the short time between the crime and his arrest. Ballistics confirmed that this gun was indeed the one used to kill Alana, reinforcing suspicions that he had premeditated the crime. Furthermore, police found various items belonging to Alana's family in Aaron's bedroom, including expensive electronics and an iPod. In his family's pickup truck, they found a duplicate key to Alana's house hidden under the floor mat, which had been made without her family's permission. Alana's family was shocked to discover how dangerous Aaron had become, especially since they had trusted him. He had manipulated the situation, keeping the key to their home a secret, which allowed him free access to their lives. Following the charges of first-degree murder, Aaron also faced charges of theft and unlawful possession of a firearm used in the crime. There were suspicions that he had stolen the gun rather than purchased it legally. Aaron denied all charges against him. Given the severity of the crime, prosecutors sought to try him as an adult. While his attorney argued for the case to be handled in the juvenile justice system, considering his age at the time of the murder. Ultimately, based on state laws, the judge ruled that Aaron would be tried as an adult due to the gravity of the offense. In 2012, when the accused, Aaron, turned 15, the hearings commenced. His attorney had consistently sought to have the case moved to the juvenile justice system, but was not successful. Prosecutors argued that the attack stemmed from Alana's refusal to date Aaron. He maintained that the crime was premeditated and that Aaron had gone to great lengths to conceal his actions, even exploiting Alana's family's trust to steal their valuables. Evidence indicated that Aaron had planned the crime and had attempted to mislead investigators and those close to Alana. Detectives noted that he displayed no emotion during interrogations or at the crime scene. He attempted to cry when suspicions were first directed at him, but it was unconvincing, making him appear even more suspicious. Amanda and Chase tried to assist Alana before the paramedics arrived, while they observed Aaron standing calmly nearby. Detached from the situation, the defense attorney attempted to present Aaron as a victim, claiming he came from a dysfunctional family that subjected him to cruelty and aggression from a young age. He argued that Alana's rejection caused emotional damage to Aaron. However, there was no evidence to support claims of past violence against him, which seemed like a desperate effort to elicit sympathy from the jury. In contrast, the prosecution was assertive and relied on concrete evidence. The prosecutor introduced a substantial amount of evidence, including a gun found in the woods near Alana's body. Ballistics confirmed that she had been shot with this gun, and Aaron's fingerprints were found on the handle, with no other traces. Testimonies from dog handlers indicated that no traces of strangers were found in the house, nor any sense of other individuals at the crime scene. Witnesses from Alana's family, including Amanda and Chase, who had previously met Aaron, testified about his suspicious behavior, noting their confusion and horror. Despite this, Aaron maintained his innocence. The defense even attempted to suggest that there was another attacker who fatally harmed Alana but was thwarted by Aaron, escaping without a trace. However, this claim seemed implausible. Aaron's accounts changed frequently during questioning. At one point, he admitted to using a gun and accidentally firing it, but the investigation disproved this, as it required significant force to operate the trigger effectively. Given his physical description, it was deemed unlikely that he could have fired it accidentally. Ultimately, none of the 27 different accounts given by him were credible. The prosecutor suggested that the motive for the crime stemmed from Aaron's anger over Alana's rejection. He had hoped to pursue a romantic relationship with her, but her refusal drove him to seek revenge. Stole a gun, made a copy of a key to the house, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. That day turned tragic for Alana. Noticing she was home alone, he took the opportunity to attack. After shooting her, he heard Amanda arriving and attempted to conceal the body in the woods. But he failed to hide his actions effectively and became increasingly agitated as he tried to evade capture. By the end of February 2012, the jury had listened to arguments from both parties and began their deliberation on the verdict. On March 9, 2012, Aaron Schmidt was found guilty of first-degree murder, possession of a firearm used in the murder, and theft. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for the murder. Additionally, he was sentenced to 5 years for possession, to be served consecutively, and another 10 years for theft, which would be served concurrently with the life sentence. This outcome brought relief to Alana's family, who had consistently warned journalists to be cautious and not to trust individuals, even if they were minors. After a Supreme Court ruling, Aaron's sentence was enforced in 2015 when he was transferred to the state prison in Hayes. Since then, he has made multiple attempts to appeal the verdict. His lawyer tried to have the case reviewed under juvenile justice laws to reduce the sentence significantly, but these efforts have not been successful. As a result, he is still in prison. Not all families are harmonious. Some hide deep conflict, so deep that one day, hatred erupts into bloody tragedy. In today's story, Maria del Carmen Hilares was brutally murdered by her own daughter, Juliana Llamoja. 65 stab wounds tore the mother's body apart, her face disfigured beyond recognition. A horrific scene that made even seasoned police officers shudder. But what's more shocking, Juliana didn't serve a life sentence, nor décadas behind bars. In just a few years, the girl walked free, even appearing on television, smiling at the camera. How could such a terrible crime end like that? And what secrets lie behind Peru's most controversial sentence? To uncover why a daughter could turn against her own mother, we must go back to where it all began. A family that looked perfect from the outside, but was slowly being torn apart from within. Maria del Carmen Hilares married Luis Llamoja Flores, a well-respected and highly paid judge. Maria works as a secretary at the military prosecutor's office, helping her family live a comfortable life. Their relationship developed quickly, and they decided to get married, later having 3 children, a daughter named Juliana and 2 sons. Juliana was her father's favorite. She was spoiled and always sought to please him. For nearly 20 years, the family enjoyed a seemingly perfect life in San Juan de Miraflores, Lima, Peru. Her father, Luis, was very proud of his daughter's creativity and love of art. By age 13, she was writing poetry and winning competitions, continuing her success as she pursued a law degree at the University of the Sacred Heart, aspiring to become a judge like her father. In contrast, Juliana's younger brothers were closer to their mother, Maria, which created tension in the household, especially between her and her mother. As Juliana matured, their relationship soured, with frequent arguments over everything from her clothing choices to her social circle. Maria suspected that Juliana had stolen her money and jewelry. Juliana's younger brother, Luis Llamoja Hilares, supported the accusation, as he was well aware of her misdeeds, which included stealing a classmate's bank card. Maria felt angry with her husband, Luis, for spoiling Juliana, making her dependent and not respecting basic rules. On the contrary, Juliana often belittled her mother by reminding her of her lack of higher education and professional status. Although Maria sought support from Luis, he consistently sided with their daughter, which created a tense atmosphere. Neighbors noticed the tense atmosphere between mother and daughter due to the constant quarrels, and they saw that Juliana changed when interacting with others, becoming happier. This dynamic was exacerbated by Luis's neglect of Maria, as he prioritized his relationship with Juliana, often treating her like a romantic partner. During family outings, Luis would take Juliana in the front seat while Maria was relegated to the back, reinforcing the emotional distance between them. As a result, Maria grew closer to her sons, who struggled to comprehend Juliana's behavior, which seemed aimed at provoking their mother. On Saturday, March 26, 2005, a troubling situation arose in their family home. Luis was away from home for a few days because he was on a business trip to Argentina with his youngest son. This left Maria, Juliana, and her younger brother Hilares at home. During the first days of their father's absence, Juliana stole jewelry from her mother's closet and spent the night out. When she returned, she was wearing her mother's jewelry, which angered her mother, but the yelling had little effect on her. Later that evening, Juliana ran away to be with friends and returned home drunk after midnight, banging on the door and claiming she had lost her keys. Hilares, awakened by her noise, suspected she was trying to annoy their mother on purpose. Juliana ignored her mother's rules, insisting she was 18 and could do what she pleased. The following morning, she acted as if nothing was wrong. When she asked for pocket money, her mother Maria gave it to her without hesitation. Shortly after, Maria received a call from her husband and reported that things were going well. Maria seemed unfazed by the ongoing family drama and didn't recognize the unusual behavior from Juliana. She believed her daughter was attending school and taking money for transportation and lunch. However, Hilaris knew she didn't have classes that day. When he pointed this out, Maria realized Juliana had tricked her again for cash, which frustrated her. On March 28, 2005, Hilaris and Maria woke up early. Hilaris had just graduated high school and was preparing for university, so they decided to go shopping for supplies. At the store, Maria discovered her bank card was missing from her bag. Assuming she left it at home, she arranged to pick up their items the next day. As they leave the supermarket, Maria warns Hilaris that if Juliana steals the card, she will suffer the consequences. Around 2:30 p.m., Hilaris asked for permission to go skateboarding with friends and left, hugging his mother goodbye, unaware it would be their last goodbye. When he returned later that evening, he found only Juliana at home. She seemed nervous, and Hilaris noticed she was drinking a large glass of soda. Despite her recent focus on healthy eating, Hilaris changed his clothes and left again, thinking that his mother, Maria, might be out shopping. When he returned around 11 o'clock p.m., he found the front door locked. This struck him as odd. After knocking for over 5 minutes, Juliana finally let him in, wrapped in a towel as if she had just showered. When Hilaris asked her what was going on, she ignored him and left the room. Hilaris went into the kitchen to look for his mother but couldn't find her. After searching the rooms and calling his mother but no one answered, he went to the guest bathroom and found the door locked. The light was off, and knocking received no answer. Concerned, he looked through a small viewing window and was horrified to see what appeared to be a body on the floor. Panicking, he called for Juliana and asked who was inside the bathroom. She feigned surprise and claimed not to know who was there. Unable to open the door himself, Hilaris called a neighbor and the police. Together, they forced the door open to find Maria lying face down in a pool of blood, with broken glasses and a knife handle nearby. The scene resembled a brutal murder. Maria bled to death without any assistance. Despite the distressing circumstances, Juliana remained composed and said nothing. Hilaris realized that she was the last person who saw their mother alive. During questioning, Juliana calmly recounted that after returning home from a walk, she and her mother argued again. Overwhelmed, Maria grabbed a knife and pointed it at Juliana's own neck. In response, Juliana picked up another kitchen knife, leading to a struggle during which her mother was killed. A forensic examination revealed that Maria had suffered 65 stab wounds, mostly shallow, with the fatal injury to her neck severing an artery. She bled to death within minutes, and no one attempted to help her. Juliana claimed the injury was self-inflicted during the fight, calling it an accident, but her story raised suspicions from the start. Maria had numerous injuries to her arms, shoulders, chest, back, and head, with her face requiring 300 stitches before burial. In contrast, Juliana only had minor scratches and a few bruises, casting doubt on her claim of self-defense and suggesting that she might have been the aggressor. The next day, when police re-interviewed Juliana, she changed her statement, admitting to striking first, but still framing it as self-defense. The conflict began when Maria returned home to find Juliana playing loud music while trying on new clothes. An argument ensued in which Maria yelled at Juliana, even throwing a vase at her. Juliana responded by shouting back, and during the altercation, Maria accused her daughter of trying to poison her. Juliana explained that she had discovered some packages in the kitchen, mistakenly believing they contained harmless substances, not rat poison. When Hilaris returned home, he found Juliana mixing soda with the poison. She claimed it was just an experiment. After Hilaris left, she realized the mixture did not react and disposed of it. However, Maria, seeing the white powder bags, accused Juliana of planning to kill her, escalating the argument further. In anger, Juliana went to the kitchen for a watermelon and grabbed a knife. As Maria continued to scream at her, Juliana stabbed the knife into the table and demanded her mother be quiet. But the insults persisted. Juliana swung the knife to scare her mother. who then grabbed another knife. Unwilling to back down, they struggled, and in the chaos, they collided with the wall, accidentally turning off the lights, while loud music continued to play, masking their commotion from neighbors. When the fight ended and Juliana regained her composure, she turned on the light and found her mother lying on the floor, severely injured with a knife in her neck. Juliana insisted it was not her fault, claiming her mother inflicted the fatal wound on herself. Instead of calling the police, she dragged her mother's body to the guest bathroom and cleaned the kitchen. Following Juliana's confession, authorities decided to conduct psychiatric evaluations for both her and Maria, suspecting that Maria might have provoked the incident or caused her own death. This decision had a significant impact. Journalists wrote sensational articles claiming that Maria had gone insane and attacked her daughter, Juliana. This infuriated Hilaris, who argued desperately that his mother had never suffered from mental illness. He attempted to refute Juliana's claim that their mother had inflicted the fatal wound on herself, but he didn't believe her. Meanwhile, Juliana eagerly embraced media speculation, insisting in interviews that their mother was unwell and accusing her younger brother of having been troubled for years because of it. Hilaris accused Juliana of lying and trying to shift blame onto their deceased mother, who could no longer defend herself. In interviews, Hilaris maintained that Juliana was the one who initiated conflict and attacked their mother. The forensic expert's report only intensified the situation, stating he could not determine with certainty who had delivered the lethal stab to the neck. This has led Juliana to adjust her testimony, stating that their mother chose to harm herself. Hilaris confronted Juliana, pointing out that their mother had been stabbed 65 times, which he argued could not be considered an act of self-defense or self-harm. He had seen her mutilated body firsthand. It looked as though it had been ravaged by wild animals. The fact that Juliana did not try to help their mother or call the police after her death, but instead dragged her body into the bathroom and waited for Hilaris to arrive, raised suspicions about the nature of the incident. Hilaris was further enraged by the support Juliana received from a large portion of the family, particularly on their father's side. He was disheartened that his relatives united to support Juliana instead of seeking justice for their mother. She received strong support from her father and even her youngest brother, both of whom believed she had acted in self-defense. Hilaris claimed his father had a history of excusing Juliana's behavior. Surprisingly, Juliana's actions garnered increasing support, including from neighbors who claimed that Maria often behaved erratically around her daughter. After psychiatric evaluations, experts concluded that Juliana was sane and aware of her actions, making her fit for trial. However, some concerning traits were also identified. Juliana displayed an unhealthy attachment to her father, Luis, known as the Electra complex, which led to rivalry with her mother. Further assessments revealed that she had a hysterical personality, prone to exaggerating emotions and seeking excessive attention through her behavior and appearance. The incident has sparked a lot of controversy and speculation on social media about the true relationship between Juliana and her father, Luis. Some have even suggested that the two were romantically involved. During a search of the family home, investigators found a knife handle but no blade. The blade was never discovered, and it remains unclear what Juliana did with it. An intact knife was found lodged in Maria's neck, yet no fingerprints were found on it. Evidence suggested that Juliana tried to conceal what she had done by hiding the knife handle, stabbing Maria multiple times, and possessing rat poison. Despite this, she continued to claim self-defense, which seemed unconvincing. Juliana's trial began on March 8, 2006. She asserted that her intent was self-defense and that she never planned to kill her mother. As the trial progressed, her story became increasingly inconsistent, especially regarding the rat poison. Initially, she claimed to have only been experimenting with the substance she found in the kitchen, but later denied any involvement with the poison at all, contradicting the discovery of several packets in her room. Juliana's lawyer argued that her actions were a result of years of emotional stress stemming from the troubled relationship with her mother, Maria. Juliana claimed she had endured constant insults and impulsive behavior from her mother. She recounted several distressing incidents, such as her mother throwing a container of beans at her, hitting her with a broom, and reading her diary without permission, all of which made her feel violated. During the hearing, she became very emotional and cried. While the defense team attempted to minimize the seriousness of the situation, an important testimony during the trial came from the forensic expert who performed Maria's autopsy. He noted that out of the 60 stab wounds, only the one to the neck was fatal, while others caused significant bleeding but were not life-threatening. The report suggested that Juliana might have delivered superficial, defensive blows while trying to protect herself. It was also highlighted that Maria's face required 300 stitches for burial. However, this detail was not emphasized during the trial. A defense expert testified convincingly that Juliana had no intent to kill. The incident was a spontaneous act born from a struggle for survival, where both were acting largely on instinct, unable to think rationally. On the other hand, the prosecution argued that the evidence and the nature of the injuries did not align with self-defense, presenting a case for a brutal murder. Ultimately, on July 26, 2006, Juliana Yamoja was found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison, along with an approximately $8,000 fine. She disagreed with the verdict and appealed. In May 2007, her sentence was reduced to 12 years, attributed to her expressed remorse and her young age. Many followers of the case in the media questioned whether her father, Luis Yamoja Flores, a respected judge, had any influence on the lenient sentence. These suspicions intensified when Juliana was released on parole in May 2009, just 4 years into her sentence. The public reacted with outrage, and her family faced backlash. But she remained unfazed by the criticism. She assured journalists that she would adhere to all conditions set by the judge, which included notifying the court of any changes in her address, a prohibition on leaving the country, and regular updates on her activities. Complying with these conditions was not difficult for her. She quickly found a job with her uncle's company. In 2010, Juliana published a poetry collection and started a related blog. Many noted that she showed no remorse for her mother's death. Following her release, she appeared on various media programs, giving interviews without expressing grief, much to the irritation of those who viewed her as a criminal, including her younger brother, Hilaris. Despite portraying herself as a victim on television, Juliana began violating her parole rules. In late 2011, Hilaris reported that she had left the country after she discovered travel photos on her social media. He mentioned in interviews that he was not pursuing her, but believed she was responsible for their mother's murder and wanted to ensure she faced consequences. At this point, Hilaris had distanced himself from his family and faced backlash for reporting Juliana. He expressed in an interview that he couldn't pretend nothing had happened and felt isolated because he was the only one still mourning their mother and seeking justice for her. After contacting law enforcement, an investigation revealed that Juliana had committed several violations of her early release conditions. She missed mandatory therapy sessions, ignored curfews, failed to work for her uncle's company, and forged her lawyer's signatures to travel to Ecuador. Juliana tried to defend herself, claiming the signatures were not hers. Due to her continued violations, law enforcement took notice again. An arrest warrant was issued in January 2012, and due to her cumulative violations, she faced at least 8 more years in prison. When police attempted to arrest her, she was missing, leading to speculation that she had escaped. Weeks went by with no sign of her. During this time, her lawyer filed an appeal, arguing that the claims of multiple violations were unfounded and that the arrest was unlawful. Juliana's arrest warrant was dropped in March 2012, and soon after, she returned home as though nothing had happened. Her younger brother, Hilaris, was very upset by this outcome. He was aware that the judge who lifted the arrest warrant was a close friend of their father. At this time, Juliana only maintained a good relationship with her youngest brother. She completed the remainder of her sentence in freedom. Hilares earned a degree in communications, speaks 3 languages, and has traveled to over 80 countries as a public relations specialist for government agencies. While he has partially reconnected with his family, their dynamics have changed permanently. He still regards his sister, Juliana, as a murderer. Juliana Yamoja obtained a law degree, but was unable to practice as a lawyer. Her legal journey ended in Europe.